All right. Today is another day of Trudeau being Trudeau. Gotta love it, right? Gotta love it. Not at all. Absolutely don't love any minute of it. Hold on here. The title of the stream didn't save properly. I have to add the date. All right, we're good to go. Stream title fixed. Lots of, well, not lots of news, but a couple interesting things to get into before we watch Question Period, House of Commons, etc., etc. Kamala Harris's presidential defeat was an attack on women's progress, Trudeau says.
Now, it shouldn't be that way. It wasn't supposed to be that way. We were supposed to be on a steady, if difficult sometimes, march towards progress. And yet, just a few weeks ago, the United States voted for a second time to not elect its first woman president. Everywhere, women's rights and women's progress is under attack, overtly and subtly. But I want you to know that I am, and always will be, a proud feminist. You will always have an ally in me and in my government. Now, it shouldn't...
Alrighty, so that's what Trudeau has to say about Donald Trump beating Kamala Harris in the presidential race. At the end of the day, the people decided. The American people voted, and it went Trump's way. And it didn't just go Trump's way a little bit, it went his way in an absolute landslide. So the idea that not only men, or only men voted Trump, absolutely insane. There were tons of women backing Trump, bashing Kamala at the same time. As a matter of fact, the Democrats were so divided because Kamala was shoehorned in and Joe Biden was booted out based on his health declining, obviously. I mean, you saw some of those speeches he gave, they're pretty brutal. The point being, Kamala was far from fit to be president, and it shows while she is vice president right now. All the things she claimed she was going to do, she already had 4 years to do it. All the things Joe Biden did in the 4-year term, she claimed she wouldn't have changed a single thing or done anything differently, meaning you were going to get the exact same 4 years, but with Kamala as the president instead. As a matter of fact, the whole idea that this was an attack on women, when tons and tons of women specifically came out backing Trump and bashing Kamala, every day the Democrats said the voters of Trump were stupid and women who backed Trump were stupid. And they came out and the polls showed the exact opposite. Women voters came out in a very high percentage. People of color came out in a very high percentage. Blacks, Hispanics, Indians, whoever. They all came out in a very high percentage voting for Trump. He won in a landslide victory, and Trudeau he's coping. It's a sad fact of the reality. The American people did not want Kamala. Kamala was not fit to be vice president, and she sure as hell is not fit to be president. It's just simply that easy. You watched her little meltdown video afterwards, where she was quite obviously drunk, slurring her words. She looked like she got 2 hours of sleep, sitting there saying how you still have the power and the people still have the power and don't let them ever take that away from you. The only people who have been trying to take away power are the Democrats. They are the ones who tried to imprison Trump. The same side that tried to assassinate him were the Democrats. Not just once, multiple times. And now we have Trudeau here coping, absolutely coping over Kamala's loss. So this comes out like way later, right? Like who cares what Trudeau really has to say about American election politics when he is destroying our country as it is? They didn't want Joe either. No, they didn't. No, they didn't want any of them. But the simple fact is, the Democrats were extremely divided over Kamala being shoehorned in. She was not fit to be there. She did not meet the credentials. She was literally the definition of a DEI hire. Simple, cut, and dry. The Bank of Canada cuts rates by 50 BPS and says the economy is performing weaker than expected as unemployment rises. This is a lot different than what Justin Trudeau and Chrystia Freeland have been telling us. Looks like the Liberal government is full of shit again. No, not full of shit again. They have been full of shit the entire time. This is nothing new. Canadians have noticed this just from simply living. The writing's on the wall, and has been for a very long time. And now we have the Bank of Canada themselves coming out and saying things are actually not looking too great.
Today, we lowered the policy interest rate by 50 basis points. This is our fifth consecutive decrease since June and brings our policy rate to 3.25%. Canada's economy grew by 1% in the third quarter, which was slower than we expected. Recent data also suggests growth will be lower than projected in the final quarter of this year. Canada's job market is still softening. Businesses have continued hiring, but the number of people looking for work has been increasing faster than the number of jobs. The unemployment rate rose to 6.8% in November. It has been especially hard for young people and newcomers to Canada to find work. While the upward and downward pressures on prices have been moderating, risks to the inflation outlook remain.
Okay, so we're not going to watch this entire thing because I want to actually go and watch the entire press conference with you guys here, because a lot of important information actually does get said in this press conference, explaining the absolute decline of the economy. They say the unemployment rate has risen in Canada. I wonder if that has to do with, I don't know, the millions of people you've decided to bring into the country that you can't house, feed, and, well, the jobs, well, there's not a lot of them right now, clearly. So let's keep bringing in millions of people, right? That sounds like a great way to fix that. Anyway, we'll quickly get into Trudeau's itinerary before we get into that Bank of Canada press conference. He will be attending question period, and there was a national caucus meeting at 10 a.m. The Prime Minister will also host a virtual meeting with the premiers of each province and territory, closed to the media. Wow, Trudeau not looking to get his photo taken. Shocking. Let's take a listen here, though, shall we?
While the upward and downward pressures on prices have been moderating, risks to the inflation outlook remain. Elevated wage increases combined with weak productivity could push inflation up. Or the economy could keep growing below its potential, which would pull inflation down. In addition, the economic outlook is clouded by the possibility of new tariffs on Canadian exports to the United States. No one knows how this will play out in the months ahead, whether tariffs will be imposed, what exemptions get agreed, or whether retaliatory measures will be taken. This is a major new uncertainty. En résumé, l'inflation est de retour.
To summarize, inflation is back to the 2% target, and lower interest rates are beginning to pass through to stronger spending by households. But the economy remains in excess supply, and the growth outlook now appears softer than we projected in October. With inflation back to target, we have cut the policy rate by 50 basis points at each of the last two decisions, because monetary policy no longer needs to be clearly in restrictive territory. We want to see growth pick up to absorb the unused capacity in the economy in order to keep inflation close to 2%. The Governing Council has reduced the policy rate substantially since the month of June, and those cuts will be working their way through the economy. Going forward, we will be evaluating the need for further reductions in the policy rate one decision at a time. In other words, with the policy rate now substantially lower, we anticipate a more gradual approach to monetary policy if the economy evolves broadly as expected. Our decisions will be guided by incoming information and by our assessment of the implications for the inflation outlook.
To summarize, inflation is back to the 2% target, and lower interest rates are beginning to pass through to stronger spending by households. But the economy remains in excess supply, and the growth outlook now appears softer than we projected in October. With inflation back to target, we've cut the policy rate by 50 basis points at each of the last two decisions because monetary policy no longer needs to be clearly in restrictive territory. We want to see growth pick up to absorb the unused capacity in the economy and keep inflation close to 2%. The Governing Council has reduced the policy rate substantially since June, and those cuts will be working their way through the economy. Going forward, we will be evaluating the need for further reductions in the policy rate, one decision at a time. In other words, with the policy rate now substantially lower, we anticipate a more gradual approach to monetary policy if the economy evolves broadly as expected. Our decisions will be guided by incoming information and our assessment of the implications for the inflation outlook. The bank is committed to maintaining price stability for Canadians and keeping inflation close to the 2% target. With that, the Senior Deputy Governor and I would be pleased to take your questions.
Okay, thank you, Governor. We will take questions first from the reporters who are here in Ottawa at the bank, and then we'll go to those who have joined us remotely. I'm going to ask everyone to please limit yourself to one question so we can get to every media outlet in the brief time.
This is going to be interesting, unless the questions were pre-screened, which they most likely were.
I think we're all veterans here, but just in case, please remember to push the green button in front of you to activate your microphone, and then push it again to shut it off once you've done asking your question. Avant de poser une question, veuillez vous identifier si je...
Please identify yourselves before asking your question. And of course, you can ask your question in the official language of your choice.
And I'm going to go to Najud Al-Maliz from the Canadian Press, please.
Hi, Governor. It appears that, It appears the government is ditching at least one of its fiscal guardrails, and last fall you called those guardrails helpful. Do you find them leaving them? Do you find the government ditching them unhelpful?
Well, Jude, look, I am a fan of the fiscal guardrails, but we're all going to get the fiscal update next Monday, and we'll read it with interest. I expect you will too. And between Monday and our next projection, which comes out January 28th or 9th, 29th, we will, whatever measures are in there, we'll take those on board. We'll build those into the projection. So, look, I'm not really going to. Let's see the whole fiscal update in its totality, and we'll do the assessment. We'll discuss it in January.
So the fiscal guardrail was $40 billion, and according to the leaks that one of the Conservative MPs mentioned in one of the briefings, the spending has gone somewhere north of $60 billion, which is really, really fucking bad. Like, if they had $40 billion to spend and mess with, and they went almost 20 plus billion more over that, according to the leaks that were given to reporters, by the way, instead of being given to the people. Absolute insanity.
Okay, next I'll go to Pramit Mukherjee from Thomson Reuters, please.
Thanks, Paul. Good morning, Governor. The economy is not really in a very bad shape. It's not teetering. And the GST rebate, it can actually boost consumption. Then the cash handout from the federal government or the Ontario government also can do that. And inflation also most likely will be up because of base effect. So in such a scenario, don't you think a 50 basis point cut gives a signal that the economy is almost at the edge of recession?
Look, if your question is, okay, 25, 50, why 50, why not 25? we discussed both options. And, as you indicated, the data since the last decision has been somewhat mixed. For every, there's negatives, there are also some positives. I mean, if you look at Q3 GDP, it came in at 1%, weaker than we were expecting, but consumption growth, housing picked up. You're starting to see lower interest rates pass through to household spending. The labor market continues to soften. The national accounts revisions, on the other hand, suggested GDP growth, or GDP level, sorry, has been stronger over the last 3 years. So, yes, there are some mixed signals in the data. And look, the Governing Council, we did chew through that. We did coalesce, though, around a 50 basis point cut, really for two reasons. First of all, the Council agreed we no longer need monetary policy that's clearly in restrictive territory. We did need restrictive monetary policy when we were getting inflation down. Inflation's been too high. We needed restrictive monetary policy to get inflation down. It's worked. Inflation's been around our 2% target since the summer. And against that background, the Governing Council agreed we no longer needed monetary policy that
Since
was
the summer,
in
by the way.
restrictive territory. And then the second element is, when you look at all the data,
That's not a long time.
it does tilt towards a softer economic outlook, a softer outlook for GDP growth than we published in October. As I said, Q3 growth has come out weaker than we expected. It looks like Q4 is going to be a bit weaker than we projected. Add in the fact that the government has lowered their immigration targets for next year. That's likely to pull GDP growth down next year, so we're not going to get it back. So you put that together, both of those factors really signaled that a 50 basis point cut made sense.
Next, we're going to go to Paul Vieira from the Wall Street Journal, please.
Good morning. How much of this half-point cut, let me rephrase that, sorry. How much was the threat of President-elect Trump's 25% tariff? How big a role did that play in making a half-point cut? And perhaps the Bank of Canada wanted to take out some insurance in the event this happened before the January 29th decision?
You saw in the press release, we did underline that the threat of new tariffs on Canadian exports, particularly at the level that's been suggested, that is a major new source of uncertainty. But the reality is, we don't know if those tariffs are going to be implemented. We don't know if exemptions are going to be agreed on some parts. We don't know what level of tariffs. We don't know if Canada will take retaliatory measures. All those things, if you want to work through the economic consequences, all those things are very important for determining what this means for the Canadian economy. We can't run policy on something that might happen. We have highlighted that it is a major uncertainty, and certainly if you're a business considering making an investment decision, even that the fact that things are uncertain, that will probably hold back your decisions until there's some more clarity. So it is probably already having some effect on the data, but really the decision we took today reflects what we see in the data. And if there is a big change, we're going to have to take that on board. Look, there's no question that if these tariffs were to move forward at the level suggested, it would be highly disruptive to the Canadian economy. It would also be very disruptive for the U.S. economy.
Yeah, so I'd just like to point out that the former Bank of Canada governor says we are in a recession right now. So the former governor is saying it, then yeah, they're clearly lying and hiding a lot of stuff. Clearly.
Hopefully that doesn't happen, but we did highlight it as a risk.
Okay, next I'm going to call on Jordan Gowling from the Financial Post, please.
Morning. Former Bank of Canada Governor Stephen Poloz made some comments last week. He said that population growth has masked underlying weakness in the economy and that we're in a recession.
What are the chances a reporter asks that as soon as I bring up those articles?
What's your response to the comments made by your predecessor?
What's my response? Well, let me say, how do we see it? I mean, I'll let people decide what adjective they want to put on it, but I mean, the traditional definition of a recession is at least two negative quarters of growth in a row. The Canadian economy is growing. Third quarter growth was 1%. It's not growing very quickly, but it is growing. Yes, as Stephen Poloz pointed out, if you look at things on a per capita basis, we have seen a number of negative quarters. And that really reflects the fact, yes, I mean, we are in excess supply.
This guy just claimed we've seen a bunch of negative quarters, but we are slowly growing. How are we slowly growing if every quarter has been negative? The number is decreasing drastically, it sounds like, not increasing. It's not a good thing. It's not something to be proud about. He even said himself that we are slowly seeing growth.
The economy has been soft. I think when you look at over the last couple of years, I mean, we've lowered inflation from 8.1% to 2%. And if you just look at the labor market, yes, the unemployment rate has gone up, but we have not seen widespread layoffs. We have not seen, people, widespread job losses as you would typically see in a recession. So, look, we needed to slow the economy. We needed weak growth to take the steam out of inflation. That has worked, but we haven't created widespread job losses as you would typically see in a recession.
Okay, I'm going to go to the other side of the room now to Randy Thantong-Knight from Bloomberg, please.
Hi, Governor. How much do you worry about Canadian dollar weakness leading to a surge in inflation down the line, or do you welcome a weaker loonie as a counterbalance to the potential U.S. tariffs and any retaliation?
I'm looking at a list of companies right now that are based in Canada or that have something to do with Canadian import-export or just the economy. A list of 38 companies that all laid off employees, including Wayfair, Tokyo Smoke, Skip the Dishes, Rogers, Open Text, Mountain Equipment, Mastermind Toys, Linux Air, Lion Electric, Lightspeed Commerce, the Indigo Books and Music, Hudson's Bay, Google themselves, Factory Direct, Enbridge Inc., Doral Industries, CPA Canada, like the list goes on. Canada Goose, Cascades Inc., BlackBerry. I don't think BlackBerry was still around, but I guess for some reason they're still laying off employees in 2024. This list goes on, and I'm sure I could find many more.
From Canada.
Well, I need to just begin by reminding everybody that we actually don't forecast the Canadian dollar. When we run our forecast, we take whatever the current level is, and we don't target the exchange rate. We target inflation, and in fact, the flexible exchange rate is a key part of the framework. It's what allows us to run monetary policy geared to the needs of the Canadian economy. So if you go back to the last monetary policy report in October, the Canadian dollar was sitting around 73 cents. This morning it's a little over, it's between 70.5 and 71 this morning. So yes, it is weaker, a little more than 2 cents weaker. And so what is driving that depreciation? Well, I think most of that depreciation in the Canadian dollar is really an appreciation in the U.S. dollar. The U.S. dollar has been strong against pretty much every other currency. If you look at the Canadian dollar against other crosses relative to major currencies other than the U.S. dollar, it's actually very little changed. So, the fact that the Canadian dollar is weaker, as you said, that is actually one of the channels through which monetary policy works. A lower Canadian dollar makes Canadian exports more competitive. in the U.S., and so that will add demand to the Canadian economy. It also makes imported goods more expensive. So that can also have some impact on inflation. So those are both things that we will need to take into account in the conduct of monetary policy. Until recently, the Canadian dollar has actually been remarkably stable. We have seen some depreciation. That is something we'll have to factor in.
All right, let's go to Mackenzie Gray from Global, please.
Hi there. I guess this is for the Deputy Governor, but Governor, chime in if you'd like. There's been a lot of talk about housing from both of you guys and the impact of immigration on that. I know you'd say a little bit more about immigration later, but just broadly, what is the bank's view on how the immigration reduction targets will impact housing going forward?
By now you know I answered the housing questions.
Well, I figured that out for a few times now, but...
Yeah, so, I mean, what we've seen in housing recently is a pretty big uptick in activity, and it's come without a commensurate uptick in prices, so that's actually been quite good news. There's some mortgage rule changes to come, another 50 basis point cut, and we know housing is very sensitive to interest rates, so we do expect some more pickup. Whether the immigration, reduction in immigration will sort of act as a counterbalance to that, that's very possible. We'll have to keep an eye on it. But so far, an increase in activity without an increase in price is a good thing for the Canadian economy right now.
Okay, I'll go to Greg Quinn from Market News, please.
Hello, happy holidays. Returning to the R word here, you lay out the risks of growth has lagged your forecasts. It's going to be slower because of the restrictions in immigration and the wild card of tariffs. In terms of what might happen next year, doesn't this return us to a potential scenario of a hard landing or a recession in Canada?
Well, we don't have a full forecast for you. We will have an full updated forecast in January. But, and look, as I said in the opening statement, I expect the GDP forecast in October, GDP growth will be lower than what we forecast in October. Having said that, you can see in the Q3 data and in more recent indicators, consumer spending is picking up. Consumer spending grew 3.5% in the third quarter. Since then, we've reduced interest rates a further 100 basis points at the last two meetings. So, yes, we do think population growth is going to be coming down considerably next year. That will pull GDP growth down because there's going to be less new consumers, less new workers in the economy. At the same time, we are expecting per capita spending or per capita GDP growth to be recovering. So we're not expecting a recession. It does, with those two things going in opposite directions, you're not going to see growth really accelerating because population growth is going to be pulling it down. More per capita growth is going to be pulling it up. We'll see exactly, what the dynamics are, but we will continue, our baseline will continue to be the economy's growing.
It doesn't seem like it. All right, if you guys are new here, make sure you hit that like button, hit that sub button. We will be getting into question period eventually, but this is going on as we speak. The Bank of Canada cuts interest rate by 0.5 point, and reporters right now are questioning what is actually happening with the economy. Thank you for joining.
So we'll go to Mike Lukacher from CTV, please.
There we go. Hi, thanks for taking our questions. I want to go back to the tariff question. I know you had said earlier you can't run policy on something that might happen, but how differently and how drastically does that affect your forecast going forward with that hanging over you? Because that is certainly a factor that I think a lot of people are thinking about.
Look, as I said before, if tariffs were imposed at the levels that have been suggested, it would be very disruptive to the Canadian economy. working through the effects is going to depend a lot on exactly what the tariffs are on, whether there are exemptions, whether there's retaliation. We are, of course, doing some analysis to see what those effects could look like. And in fact, if you want a reference point, if you go back to, I think it's the July 2019 monetary policy report, we actually have an extended appendix where we looked at, actually, interestingly, a 25% increase in tariffs. It wasn't exactly what's been proposed because it was across everybody, not just Canada. And what you see there is, yes, it has a major impact on GDP growth in Canada. So yes, we are dusting that off. We are looking at different scenarios. And, if those things happen, certainly they will have a big impact on the Canadian economy, and we'll have to, it will have a dramatic effect on our forecast, and we'll have to, as a governing council, consider what that means for monetary policy. As I said, let's hope that does not happen. But what we're doing is we're doing some analysis to get prepared for that possibility. I think that's all we can do. Unfortunately, monetary policy can't eliminate that uncertainty. We can hopefully be with inflation back to 2%, with interest rates now substantially lower, hopefully we can play a role of providing some stability, but we can't eliminate that.
Okay, we'll go to Kevin Carmichael from The Logic, please.
A question about business investment. You noted that consumption seems to be finding new life, but business investment still seems dead. Do you think you've lowered the cost of capital enough to encourage some investment, or do you anticipate that that stall to continue?
Look, Kevin, as I said, we don't have a revised forecast. If you go back to the forecast we had in October, the typical sequencing is household spending picks up first. The combination of stronger demand and lower interest rates starts to, next you start to see investment pick up. So, the fact that right now we're starting to see some pickup in consumption, you would expect to see a lag to investment. As I highlighted earlier, the uncertainty resulting from the threat of new U.S. tariffs is probably going to weigh on, it's going to be difficult for businesses to take decisions against that background. So, we'll have to look at what we'll be doing surveys. We will be able to get hopefully a better fix by the time we get to January. But yes, I think there is a risk that investment is weaker.
Okay, we got one more question here in the room, and it is from Mark Rendell of the Globe and Mail.
Thank you for taking the question. So in the October statement, you said we expect to reduce the policy rate further if everything comes in line. You've changed that. You've removed the statement saying we expect further cuts. You're also now talking about moving to a more gradual approach to monetary policy. Are you expecting to cut rates further? And how should we be thinking about this shift in language to discuss a more gradual approach to monetary policy?
So what's next? Well, let's just start with the president for a minute. The last two decisions we've cut by 50 basis points. And as I highlighted earlier, really what, central to that was inflation. With inflation now back to 2%, the Governing Council agreed that monetary policy no longer needed to be clearly restrictive. So if you go back to June, we have now cut our policy rate by a total of 175 basis points, bringing it from 5% down to 3.25%. That's a lot. That's substantial. And those cuts will be working their way through the economy. So going forward, what do I expect? Going forward, I expect the Governing Council will be considering further reductions in the policy rate. But as I said, with the policy rate now a lot lower, if the economy evolves broadly as we're expecting, I anticipate we'll be taking a more gradual approach. So what does a more gradual approach mean? Well, we've just cut by 50 basis points at the last two meetings. So more gradual is more gradual than that. That is obviously a pretty wide zone. That's deliberate. We're going to take our decisions one meeting at a time based on the best available information and our assessment of its implications for monetary policy.
Okay, that is it for In the Room. We're going to go to those reporters who have joined us online. I'll just remind you folks, please to come off mute only to ask your question, then go back on mute as soon as you've finished. That way everyone will be able to hear the response. And I'm going to call first on Alicia Sikierska from Yahoo Finance.
Thank you for taking our questions. I just wanted to follow up on Mark's question. Given Canadians should expect a more gradual approach to policy easing, should they be prepared for a pause? I mean, what's your message to them going forward as they plan their lives, continue to renew mortgages, et cetera?
You know, I don't really have much more to add on the previous answer. We've lowered interest rates substantially. And at the last two meetings, we took two bigger than normal steps. What we're signaling is, yes, you know, we expect we will be considering further reductions, but when we look at things now, our thinking is we'll be taking a more gradual approach. And look, the reality is we're going to take those decisions one meeting at a time. We'll look at the information we have in January. We'll do the assessment. We'll take a decision. But the idea here is we're trying to share how we see things, what our thinking is, what is our mindset going forward. And these, you know, we want to be as clear as we can with Canadians, but we have to, you know, you got to remind people that, yeah, these are conditional statements. We're going to take our decisions one meeting at a time at the end of the day.
Okay, next we'll go to Max Sato from Mace News. Go ahead, please, Max.
Thank you, Paul. Good morning, Governor, Senior Deputy Governor. My question is about the appropriate inflation target. It's for both of you. First, Senior Deputy Governor Rogers, during your fireside chat in Toronto, you mentioned that it's a good time to review the target, and you mentioned other things like outreach and internal research. So what are the Canadians telling you about how they feel about the target, and how is your internal research going? And for Governor Macklem, you often asked whether the bank should adopt the higher inflation target. And in one of your comments in Parliament a few months ago, you made a point saying, what's the point of having a target if you can't keep it? Could you expand on that issue from the viewpoint of whether there's anything we could learn from other central banks' target ranges, such as Australia's 2 to 3% and India's 2 to 6? Thank you very much.
Let me go first. All right, Tony, that's a wide-ranging question. So I think what I was referring to in the fireside chat is the bank regularly, every 5 years, reviews our inflation targeting framework, and that's coming up. And as part of that review, we always undertake a broad outreach to Canadians. We talk to academics, we talk to economists. That process is just getting going, so I can't give you a lot of feedback right now about what we're hearing from Canadians, but I can tell you that we will make sure that we give Canadians a chance to feed into that discussion. It's good timing in the sense that we're coming out of a period where we were all reminded how difficult inflation is for Canadians, and so I expect, perhaps unlike previous reviews we've done in past years, there will be more Canadians who want to participate and give their views this time around.
Yes, it's not the only thing that's difficult for Canadians right now. Anyway, on top of everything that's going on, late yesterday, the Senate held a question period, so I wanted to watch a little bit of that. The Senate are the big dogs of Parliament, you could say. They are the upper end to the lower end, which is the House of Commons. These are the people who essentially are going to be passing things, and I'm very curious to see what they have to say based on some of the legislations and acts that were attempted to be passed within the House of Commons. Some of them passed, some of them failed. Some things like affordability, other things like that massive tax break that the Liberals claim they're going to give. Let's see what is going on here.
Période de questions. Senator Platt.
Leader, Conservative senators have asked you repeatedly about the convoluted 2-month GST holiday that your fiscally irresponsible government came up with a few weeks ago. The Globe and Mail reported this morning that this tax trick, along with the idea of $250 checks to people making $149,000 a year, was the brainchild of the Prime Minister's office alone. Minister Freeland's department finally views something as it was fiscally unwise and making little economic sense. Finally, we're in agreement with the Finance Minister. They are at odds. If the Prime Minister doesn't even have the support of his Finance Minister, then why should Canadians support him? Time to call a carbon tax election, isn't it, Leader? And answer the first question as well, not no to the second one.
Senator Gold.
Well, as if you've read all the coverage, which I have, you will also note that the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister expressed her support and indeed appeared before our committee. This committee, our committee, studied under the chairmanship of Senator Carignan 3 high-quality and intensive meetings on this particular bill. It was passed by the committee without amendment. A debate will begin, and I know Senator Platt and you and your colleagues will have ample opportunity to make your views known. So that's the answer to the first part of the question. And the second part of the question is that, as witnessed by the failure of the non-confidence motion, only one of which your party seemed to propose, I guess it didn't want to lose 3 in a row, this government still has the confidence of the House.
Senator Platt.
You got the confidence of Jagmeet Singh, and nobody voted for him to be the Prime Minister. The Parliamentary Budget Officer predicts that Minister Freeland has blown past her fiscal guardrail of $40 billion. There are now media reports that the deficit projection for the fall economic statement could hit $62 billion, Leader.
Wow.
If that figure is wrong, and I hope it is, will the government say so now and not wait until Monday?
Senator Gold.
Well, Senator, as we know, and as you intimated in your, or implied or stated in your question, the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance will be delivering her fall economic statement on Monday. That's when I will know what the number is, and the rest of us in the chamber and Canadians.
Senator Husakos.
Senator Gold, despite the significant financial burden the GST places on new homes and growing unaffordability of housing in Canada, your government, with the help of the Maserati Marxist Jagmeet Singh, voted against the Conservative motion to eliminate the GST on new homes under $1 million. How do you justify maintaining this tax while housing costs remain out of reach for so many Canadians? The Trudeau government has relegated a whole generation of young Canadians to living in the basement of their parents' home. This common-sense Conservative measure would allow Canadian homebuyers to save up to $50,000 and will spark construction of more than 30,000 homes and apartments across the country. And your Trudeau government voted against it. Why, Senator Gold?
Senator Gold.
Senator Husakos, as I stated before, and I'll take the opportunity to state it again, you are quoting only part of what is at issue in the housing issues. And indeed, your party your leader, who you follow so loyally, made a particular offer. What you have not mentioned, but which is in the public record, is his other statements to cut millions, if not billions of dollars of investments that this government has brought forward to stimulate and help housing in a whole suite of measures. You cannot, well, you can clearly do, quote selectively when it serves your purposes. The fact is, this government has invested seriously in a multitude of ways to address the housing question. the offer that your party made was not a serious offer and ignored all the programs that it would cut to the detriment of housing in Canada.
Senator Houssakos.
Senator Gold, if you have courage, call an election and see which leader the Canadian public would follow. Absolutely. Please don't talk to us about your GST tax tricks and your Mickey Mouse economics that your government is putting forward. Chrystia Freeland's appearance at our committee last week was a disaster. Now we know it because our own department advised against this. Our National Finance Committee here in the Senate did an analysis that shows that this tax trick will save Canadians a whopping $4.50. My dear friends. How much is it ultimately going to cost Canadians in administrative costs to apply something that will bring $4.50?
Senator Gold.
Senator Houssakos, I stand by my answer. There is a serious program that this government has put on the table to deal with the housing crisis affecting so many Canadians, and your party is authoring nothing but empty slogans, however well rehearsed.
I can't lie, this is a lot of the same talking points you would hear in just normal House of Commons question period. I figured it would be a little bit different.
Of social media use on youth's development and long-term health outcomes. It calls for greater responsibility on the part of technology platforms. Only weeks ago, the Australian government has taken action and now has a strict law adopted by Parliament that would ban access to social networks for those under 16. The British government is considering following Australia's lead. Senator Gold, there is a consensus that technology companies need to change the way they exploit children and teenagers. These platforms, we know, are designed to be addictive, and it's urgent to act to avoid damaging an entire generation. Senator Gold, will the Canadian government respond to the World Health Organization's calls to strengthen the responsibility of social media platforms when it comes to the well-being of youth users?
Senator Gold.
Thank you, Senator, for your question and for underlining what we have come to understand altogether belatedly, in many cases, and painfully. And that is that the manipulation of our habits through the ease of access to information and the algorithms that lurk undetectable in so many social platforms have had a negative impact not only on youth, but frankly on too many of us in this country and elsewhere. It is also regrettable that too many social media platforms too often pay at best lip service to regulating or policing their approach to feeding us what we already want. The government is considering all options, but there is no plans to announce anything in the immediate term.
In March 2023, Prime Minister Trudeau said, and I quote, "As a parent, I spend a lot of time talking to my kids about what's online and how they should try and, go outside and play more sports and not get so wrapped up in their phone," end of quote. This is, of course, great, but do you agree, Senator Gold, that it will take, that individual parenting will not be enough to protect our kids and that we will need to do something as a government?
Senator Gold.
Senator, I confess I don't know the answer, and so I'm not going to assume that legislation is it's certainly not the only tool. Much will depend upon how, if there's any legislative intervention, the devil or God is in the details, and absent that in front of us, I hesitate to speculate. It's a real social problem we have to address in a holistic way.
Yeah, so I figure, I just need to point out the fact that they want the government to literally police every aspect of your life at this point. That's more or less what it's coming down to. And they're trying to do it with the internet. It starts with the internet. It's already more or less happened, depending on what your viewpoints are, over the past 4 years, especially with the big lockdown.
Important at this point in time, and are you confident will be maintained should a new government come into power?
Senator Gold.
Well, thank you for your question. Let me begin by...
Let the government raise your children. Don't do anything as a parent to raise your kids. Let some random stranger, some random conglomerate of people sitting in chairs dictate what your kid can and can't do.
In the coming decade. It gives Canada the diplomatic tools it needs to continue to assert its sovereignty, to advance its national security interests, and promote a stable, prosperous, secure Arctic for the people of the Arctic and for our country. I certainly cannot speak to any future government's commitments. This was, but a look backwards in history shows that this office did once exist or something equivalent and was terminated under a previous government. But circumstances have changed, and our understanding of the threats and challenges to our sovereignty in the Arctic have changed. I hope that all governments will take that seriously. It's an important part of our country, our identity, and our sovereignty.
Senator Deakin, Ontario.
Thank you. As follow-up, do you know when we can expect, I heard your answer, when we can expect this office to be up and running with the new ambassador, or the satellite sites to be opened up in Anchorage and Greenland? Thank you.
Senator
Thank you for your, thank you for your question. I don't have a specific timetable, Senator, but I am advised that work is seriously underway.
Senator Black.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Senator,
thank you, Madam Speaker.
Jurisdictions across Canada continue to face interprovincial and interterritorial trade barriers. In July of 2017, the Canadian Free Trade Agreement came into force with the goal of reducing and eliminating barriers on the movement of labour, goods, services and investments within Canada to establish an open domestic market. A 2024 CFIB report entitled The State of Internal Trade, Canada's Interprovincial Cooperation Report Card provides an overview of the work done to date to reduce barriers. However, it also highlights significant barriers remain, hindering businesses' ability to circulate goods and services across jurisdictions right here in Canada. The report estimates that up to $200 billion could be added to Canada's GDP every year. Canada's wine industry is one example of a good that continues to be hindered due to interprovincial trade. Canada is capable of exporting wine to major global markets, but unable to ship wine across this country. This inconsistency hampers domestic agricultural products. Senator Gould, what's your government plans?
Senator Gould.
No, thank you for your question, Senator. Look, international trade barriers have long been an impediment to economic growth, one in which our government, this government, has tackled head-on. As you are aware, colleagues, in 2017, the government took leadership on this file through the Canada Free Trade Agreement, and since then, the government has either narrowed or completely eliminated a third of the federal exemptions, which is providing Canadian businesses with more opportunities to grow and to compete anywhere in this country. In 2019, 5 years ago, the government removed the remaining federal regulatory impediments to free internal trade in wine and other alcoholic beverage. But the only remaining barriers, and they are numerous, fall exclusively within provincial and territorial jurisdiction. They can only be removed by the provinces or the territories.
Senator Black.
Thank you. Senator Gould, CFTA has not delivered what it was intended to do. With BC dealing with a catastrophic loss of grapes in 2023 after back-to-back bad winters, Ontario now dealing with a back-to-back oversupply, it would seem logical that the federal government may choose to help transport grapes across the country. The wine industry is unable to sell its products to other provinces, nor can they sell or share the grapes. On behalf of the ag industry, can you tell us how your government is supporting the wine industry?
Senator Gould.
Senator, the government of Canada is supporting industries as best as it can within its areas of jurisdiction, within its capacity. But any remaining barriers to interprovincial trade in wine and or other beverages are now are exclusively within provincial jurisdiction and need to be addressed between provinces to address this problem.
Senator Dalphon.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Senator Dalphon, thank you, Madam Speaker. Yesterday, the newspapers mentioned that the parliamentary budget officer indicated that the cost of the tax vacation for the GST could go up to $200.7 billion. Before the Finance Committee, it was indicated that the direct fiscal cost was $1.5 billion for the federal government, plus up to $1.2 billion to compensate the provinces who have harmonized the tax. Mr. Government Representative, Senator Gold, can you indicate whether some provinces have indicated that they would renounce this? Because I understand that nearly $1 billion would go to Ontario. Senator Gold, thank you for the question. Firstly, as the Minister noted, discussions are ongoing with all of the provinces, and based on the information that I have, they have been fruitful and they are continuing. To answer your question, I was advised that the province of Ontario, Newfoundland and Labrador, and the Prince Edward Islands have already renounced their right for compensation. And concerning the other provinces, discussions are ongoing. Senator Delfont. I understand. Thank you very much for this answer. So the fiscal cost is $1.5 billion direct, and there will be no compensation through the agreement for the HST. Did I understand that correctly? Senator Gold, as you know, we learned more before committee. There are agreements between Canada and the provinces, and the agreements set out for the right to compensation if there is a loss that reaches a certain level. But for the moment, what I have reported is correct, and the other discussions are ongoing.
Thank you, Speaker. Senator Gold, almost a year and a half has passed since the passage of Bill C-41. To date, 12
There seems to be a lot more groups in the Senate than there are in the House of Commons.
One of which was later withdrawn. Despite this, no response has been issued to the applicants who applied between 4 to 7 months ago. The low number of applicants indicates an understandable reluctance amongst organizations to work in areas controlled by terrorist entities. When will non-governmental organizations have the opportunity for written submissions and oral consultations for the government's comprehensive review of Bill C-41?
Senator Gold.
Well, Senator, thank you for your question and for reminding us of the important bill and the challenges that it continues to face in realizing in its promise and potential. I will make inquiries.
If a good portion of them are Trudeau's people, then why aren't they just with the Liberal? I don't understand. Like, some of them are non-affiliated. One was like Canadian Progressive. The other was Senate Committee or Senate Group or something like that. Like, they're all different.
Importantly and tirelessly on behalf of those seeking refuge will make their voices heard.
Senator Tulajan.
Senator Gold, during your government's period of inaction, programs have been halted or delayed, resulting in costs both financial and human. I have recently been approached by women who work for an organization that provides assistance to migrants and refugees, and they asked me about your government's plan to alleviate these costs. How am I to respond to those questions?
Senator Gold.
Well, again, Senator, this government is working hard to achieve multiple goals in assistance to those who are seeking refuge and asylum. It is doing so in partnership with international organizations, with international partners, and here at home, obviously, in collaboration and consultation with provinces and territories. And I understand the challenges that people are facing, and again, applaud you for the work that you are doing on their behalf.
Senator Platt.
Leader, a 20-year-old man was shot in the back and killed last Friday while doing his job as a security guard at an apartment building in Edmonton. His grieving loved ones deserve more than our condolences. They deserve answers and justice. It appears that one of the individuals charged in this murder has a long history of violent crime. This includes forcing a woman into a trunk of a car at gunpoint in 2018, In 2022, it appears the RCMP charged him with multiple offences stemming from a robbery, including 16 counts of possessing a firearm while prohibited. Shouldn't Canadians be told if this is the same criminal? And if so, Senator Gold, why was he out on the streets?
Senator Gold?
Well, Senator, I do apologize for not being able to answer your question, but you have to provide Canadians.
I feel like that's all this guy could say is, I apologize I don't have the answers, I apologize I don't know how to answer this question. I feel like he said that numerous times already.
Story for the victims and all. But I do not know whether the person was out on the streets because he had served his sentence. I do not know if he was out on statutory release, which is prescribed by law. I do not know if he was out on release because he was granted parole. So all I can do is offer my condolences and sympathies to the victims of his violent crimes. I'm not ducking the question, Senator, but you can make a general point about crime, and crime is a serious problem for Canadians. But if you want an answer, you have to provide me with the information so that I can have a chance to answer it.
Senator Platt.
You have to provide the information. Why doesn't your government find the information? You know the person I'm talking about. Your government knows who I'm talking about.
Oh, cook him, Donald.
Canadians absolutely deserve to know if this
Get
is
him,
the same
Donald.
guy. You can find that out. They deserve to know if he was out on bail or another form of release when he killed a security guard. Don't Canadians deserve a government that is focused on stopping crime and real criminals and finding out why they're out in the street instead of pulling stunts like promising to take more guns away from law-abiding Canadians?
Senator Gold.
Well, Senator, next time you want a question from me, perhaps you'd give me the courtesy of giving me an advance notice so I can perhaps have the answer in this chamber. I simply do not know the facts around this particular case, and you knew that when you asked me the question. But you've made your points. Bravo.
I'll ask you again first about that.
Senatrice Meville-Deschênes.
Senator Meville-Deschênes. Senator Gold? I feel compelled to follow up on Senator Petitclerc's question. I am disappointed, extremely disappointed, by what the government is not doing, faced with these acute mental health problems that ensue from an overly long exposure to social media. A whole generation is imperiled. The proposed bill only has a measure that prevents sexual exploitation images from being broadcast on the internet, which is already illegal in any case. So why aren't we doing more? All Western countries are asking themselves questions about this and pondering the problem. This is a very, very serious societal problem. Senator Gold, I completely agree that this is a society-wide problem that's extremely serious. It's not the case that there's no thought going into this here or elsewhere. All I can tell you, dear colleague, is that at this time there is no bill that was drafted or announced to the public that deals with that problem as such. Once again, I will undertake to ask the questions you've asked, including the questions of our colleague Senator Petitclerc. For the moment, I'm unaware of the existence of such a bill, such as the one that you mentioned, Senator Meville-Deschênes. And yet, I have a bill that's at the report stage in the House of Commons, which wanted to work on a small part of that work, which was fairly targeted, to at least protect children from being exposed to pornography. And yet, the government has opposed that bill. Senator Gold. Thank you. Well, it's not really a question, but I am aware of your bill, which went through the chamber as well. And you are also aware of the government's response
the interpreter fall asleep?
Senator
Hello?
Mavidi-Chen. Another subject.
Okay, then.
On another subject, Senator Gold, the Retail Council of Quebec is calling on the federal government to impose penalties on Chinese platforms, such as Shein and Temu, that encourage disposable fashion and compete unfairly with all Quebec retailers. In France, the National Assembly has unanimously adopted a bill that will impose penalties of 50% of the value of the product and redistribute them to local, sustainable clothing producers. What does our government intend to do to reestablish healthy competition rather than leaving all the space to fast fashion, which is polluting our planet? Senator Gold, thank you for the question. The government has launched a consultation in order to collect data on these issues to find plastic pollution coming from the textile and other forms of pollution coming from the textile and clothing sector. There's been a rapid mobilization amongst many stakeholders. The document proposes an approach to waste management that keeps clothing and textiles for as long as possible in the circular economy. The priority will be granted to the redesign, reduction, reuse, and repair.
All right, so statements by members has started on the House of Commons question period, but I know we all really don't care about statements by members, and there's only about 4 minutes left here, so I figured we'd finish this off and then continue onwards.
As well as recycling of these products rather than recovery, energy recovery, and using landfills. Senator Mavidi-Chen, I'm coming back to my main subject. Shein sells dresses for less than $10. How is it possible? Shein has already confirmed that there were cases of child exploitation among its own suppliers, and an investigation also revealed that the Chinese disposable fashion giant uses cotton coming from Xinjiang, where Uyghurs are subjected to forced labor. Beyond all our fine rhetoric...
Bro, I'm sorry, what are we supposed to do about forced labor in other countries? Like, what is Canada actually going to do? What steps are we going to take to prevent this from continuing to happen or stop? Like, we can't. That's the simple fact of the matter. Is it awful? Yes. Is it something that should happen? Absolutely not. But what are we going to do about it? We're not going over to places like China and physically demanding them to stop it, and we can't do that. It'd probably cause some sort of international trade war or an actual war. So... like, what the hell are we doing here?
About human rights, what are we doing concretely? Senator Gold, thank you for the question. There are more and more inspections when it comes to sniffing dogs and new emerging technologies to prevent drugs, weapons, and illicit merchandise to circulate across the borders, as you mentioned. As Minister LeBlanc said, the government is making the necessary investments in organizations responsible for enforcing the law and ensuring that they have the tools they need.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Senator Gold, this past Friday, when responding to questions on Canada's newly released Arctic foreign policy, Minister Joly suggested that it might be time to reconsider the 2005 decision not to join the U.S. ballistic missile defense program. Russia has already used intermediate-range ballistic missiles with devastating impact against Ukraine and is prepared to use them indiscriminately, and has also mentioned intercontinental ballistic missiles. The threat is real, and as Russia is Canada's neighbour, we need to be realistic about defending ourselves starting now. When can we expect to hear about our government's way ahead and how we counter ballistic missile threats in Canada, in our Arctic, and in North America?
Senator Gold.
Thank you for your question.
The little clap there at the end.
And again, for underlining the strategic importance of defending our North from the increasingly challenging threats that it poses, not only from our neighbor Russia, but from other countries who have designs on our North. This government has made historic investments and will continue to make historic investments in our defense and in that which
historic investments. That's why we have failed to meet the 2% mark for over 10 years now of your government, buddy.
which is necessary for our sovereignty. It will also work, continue to work in the context of NORAD and with our allies, including the United States, to work together to defend Canadian sovereignty in North America, in the north of North America. These are challenging times, and I don't need to multiply the challenges, but this government is committed to doing everything that it can to protect and advance our interests, including our sovereignty and national interest in the Arctic.
Senator Patterson.
Minister Joly rightly stated, I think we have to be extremely realistic with the threats toward the Arctic, and this includes that China was not much present in 2005. We also are acutely aware of the current and incoming administration of our neighbours to the south in terms of our 2% NATO commitment. As a proud and sovereign nation, we don't respond very well to being shamed into action. Will the government be proactive and push forward this review of our participation with the U.S. or not in some form of ballistic defense program?
Senator Gold.
All right, at this point, I'd rather listen to statements by members if that's what they're just going to be debating. The day Zelensky pays us back is the day Trudeau actually tells one single truth, which is never going to happen. So you can expect that money to be gone forever.
The honourable member for Calgary Forest Lawn.
Taylor and Melody from my riding are national champion sports shooters who compete internationally. They're supposed to represent Team Canada on the world stage in Czechia. They put years of hard work into training and competing. But this latest Liberal NDP gun grab has put their training and competition in jeopardy. Liberals are weak on crime. Yet sports shooters, hunters, farmers, and First Nations across Canada are punished for this incompetence. After 9 years, gun crime has skyrocketed 116% across Canada. This weak Prime Minister's catch and release bail policy lets violent repeat offenders out on the street. Instead of this Liberal NDP government's ridiculous gun grab, they need to step back so that a common-sense Conservative government can restore law and order, secure the border, and ensure repeat offenders get jail and not bail. We will respect the traditions and livelihoods of our hunters, farmers, First Nations, and sports shooters, and bring home safe communities once again.
The honourable member for Winnipeg South Centre.
Mr. Speaker, my riding of Winnipeg South Centre is home to thousands of older adults. Upon being elected, one of my first steps was to establish an Older Adults Advisory Council. Comprised of nearly a dozen constituents over the age of 65, we meet regularly to discuss issues that are pertinent to them. One of the topics that we have visited on several occasions is the heartbreaking damage caused to individuals and families as a result of dementia. Tragically, many Winnipeggers, including Earl Moberg, have gone missing or been put in harm's way because of this awful condition. Fortunately, Earl and his family have had many champions, like my constituent Ashley Mitchell, who is working hard to draw awareness to this important cause. The Alzheimer's Society of Manitoba, alongside other organizations and individuals like Ashley, continue to serve as wonderful advocates and resources. I rise today, Mr. Speaker, in honor of their work to draw attention to this plight facing tens of thousands of Canadians across the country, and to encourage all of us to elevate the conversation so that together we can support families, individuals, and our communities alike in the face of these challenges. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The honourable member for Parry Sound Muskoka.
Mr. Speaker, all across Canada, government charges account for more than 30% of the cost of a new home. These taxes block home building and drive up prices for all Canadians. Conservatives offered a plan right here in this House to axe the federal sales tax on new homes under $1 million. This would have saved Canadians up to $50,000 on the price of a new home and would ignite the construction of more than 30,000 new units every single year. The Liberal government's own top housing official confirmed at committee yesterday that this policy would, and I quote, inspire more home building if we can reduce the cost of home building. But the Liberals in the bloc, of course, they voted against it. While this weak Prime Minister continues to borrow money to buy support of the bureaucracy building mayors, common sense Conservatives will fight to axe the federal sales tax on new homes under $1 million, saving Canadians thousands of dollars. Let's bring it home.
The honourable member for Fredericton.
Mr. Speaker, now more than ever, the Canadian Armed Forces need women.
Not only do we need to recruit more talented, dedicated women to serve our country, but we need to retain those we already have. Unfortunately, thousands of CAF members experience sexual assault in the military each year, and women are at the highest risk. 80% of sexual assaults in our military go unreported because the survivors do not believe speaking up will make a difference. We must call out the underlying rape culture and act urgently to change it. Bill C-66 introduces changes to the National Defense Act and places investigations of sexual misconduct outside the chain of command and into the public system. It's a start, but it's not enough. Survivors have felt invisible for far too long. I will keep fighting for their voices to be heard. I'll end with an excerpt of a poem written by my constituent, a survivor and a veteran, describing her experience of living with this trauma. It was only one night. Move on, let it go. Forgive and heal is what you say, but for me it has been 10,220 days. 10,220 days of losing my career, my ability to hold a job, my health, my self-esteem, my hope. 10,220 days stolen. But yes, you're right. It was only one night. This has to stop, Mr. Speaker.
Great statement.
The honourable member for St. Albert, Edmonton.
Mr. Speaker, yet again, the leader of the NDP has sold out Canadians who are being pummeled by the economic vandalism of this Prime Minister. The leader of the NDP said that the Liberals are too weak, too selfish, and too beholden to corporate interests. Turns out his words mean absolutely nothing, because this week the NDP had an opportunity to support a Conservative motion of non-confidence that incorporated those very words, but they didn't. Why? Because the leader of the NDP selfishly wants his $2.3 million pension. After claiming to have ripped up his coalition agreement with the Prime Minister, the leader of the NDP has taped it back together under new terms, whereby the leader of the NDP gets his pension, the Prime Minister gets his power, and Canadians get the bill. It's time for a carbon tax election.
The honourable member for Louis Saint Laurent. Mr. Speaker, the housing crisis is affecting Canada from coast to coast to coast. That's why the Conservatives are proposing an effective, concrete and costed measure that will directly help Canadian families and to those who build housing. We want to eliminate the GST on new homes. In concrete terms, this measure will save Quebec homebuyers up to $50,000 or $2,500 a year in mortgage payments. Now that's real help. It's effective. It will really help families. That's why the Corporation of Propriétaires Immobiliers du Québec said that the Conservative leader's proposal adds to the ideas that go in the right direction. But unfortunately, the leader of the Bloc Québécois and his MPs voted against this common sense proposal. That's the Liberal Bloc. Vote with the Liberal government and keep it in power. And yet the head of CMHC told a House of Commons committee that our plan would certainly encourage more housing if we could reduce the cost of building housing. Despite this, the Bloc leader and the Liberals are against it. That's why we need to bring home a good Conservative government.
The honourable member for Yukon.
Mr. Speaker, Yukon University has officially become the 97th member of Universities Canada. Over the past 60 years, this progressive institution has grown.
All right, here's my statement, considering this has been going on forever. Thank you all very much for being here. Each and every one of you are absolutely awesome, and I appreciate you spending your time here on this channel. Out of everywhere you could be, thank you very, very much for joining me, watching the circus unfold on a day-to-day basis at this point. Honestly, I wouldn't do this without you guys. Like, it's only fun because of you guys. The only reason I continue to do it is because of you guys in the chat. It's kind of boring to watch this alone, right? So building up this community, having you guys speak your minds, speak whatever within the YouTube TOS limits, guidelines, whatever. Thank you guys very much for being here. Question period is about to begin very soon. Let's get into it.
Ready for the holidays. As always, I want to extend my heartfelt thanks to the residents of Vancouver Granville. We are all made better by your ideas, engagement, and solutions, and I am so grateful to serve you. The holidays are a time to take care of one another, and that's why the 2-month GST holiday that starts this Saturday will make the holidays a little bit brighter. Together, we are delivering on things that matter to most every Canadian. In Vancouver Granville, there are 4 institutions, the Hellenic Community of Vancouver, the Fringe Festival, the Maritime Museum, and the Planetarium, that will all receive change-making funding to expand and improve their services and buildings. As we head into the holidays, Mr. Speaker, let's be kind to one another, let's reach out to those in need, and be grateful for the fact that we live in the best country on earth. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Kushali Mubarak.
Order, please. If I could ask colleagues to please take their conversations a little quietly so we can listen to the member's statements. The honourable member for for Edmonton Strathcona.
Mr. Speaker, a recent report issued by Women's Shelters Canada has found that the crisis in affordable housing is impacting women's shelters across Canada and putting women's lives at risk. As the Executive Director of Women's Shelters Canada explained, quote, since there's no affordable housing, women are staying in shelters longer. New women can't come in if women already in shelter have nowhere to go. The lack of affordable housing is so acute that half of the women that are needing shelter are having to return to live with their abusers because they will become homeless. Access to affordable housing is a matter of life or death. Women's shelters are at capacity. There is nowhere to go. It doesn't have to.
Yeah, a lot of questions get asked, not a lot of answers.
Survivors of gender-based violence was announced in mid-April and ran out of funds in August. The federal government must step up and provide more funding to women's shelters, to the Housing Benefit Program, to build transitional housing, and to non-market and cooperative.
Honestly, I don't know about you guys, but anything the NDP has to say, I don't care, because they had their opportunity to oust Trudeau for a third time, and they didn't follow through. So I don't care what they have to say. They're gonna be a nothing burger party by the time 2025 hits anyway. They're good. They're good as gone. They're done for.
And that's probably because you're familiar with the Duceppe Theatre that she directs and its long tradition of excellence in Québécois drama.
They sit there and cry about the very issues they've helped create. It's just pathetic.
Social economy category by the Les Affaires newspaper. After taking over the reins in 2018 from her Aunt Louise, Amélie Duceppe has transformed the theatre's administration through collaborative, agile, and creative teamwork. Under her leadership and that of artistic co-directors David Lorrain and Jean-Simon Traversy, the Duceppe Theatre's doors are opening to more and more new audiences who are discovering or rediscovering Québécois theatre. On behalf of the Bloc Québécois, congratulations, Amélie Duceppe, and thank you for your incredible work promoting this essential name in Québécois culture. Thank you. The Honourable Member for Bellechasse, Les Etchemins-Lévis. Great disappointment, Mr. Speaker. Once again, the Bloc Québécois saved the government yesterday. Since the Bloc leader has been in Ottawa, his party has voted for over $520 billion in Liberal spending. That's almost 200 votes in favour of this government. And for what? I ask you, a public service that has practically doubled in size, consulting firms hired again and again, while direct services get worse and worse. The Bloc, which claims to defend Quebec's interests, nevertheless supports spending that feeds an increasingly imposing and centralized federal government. How can they claim, hand on heart, to want Quebec independence, while they actively collaborate with the federal Liberals? That's not how you serve Quebec's interests. Quebecers deserve better than this Bloc Liberal coalition that turns its back on their hopes and on their pocketbooks. They deserve better, a conservative government. Order. Order.
Oh, it's getting crazy, guys. Pierre is fired up by the looks of it. I don't know if you saw that.
The Honourable Member for Lac Saint-Louis.
Education is the key to an individual's success and to the progress of society, whether economic, social, scientific, or cultural. The quality of a student's educational experience is dependent upon the passion and creativity of their teachers. I would like to draw the attention of this House to Rosemary Hill, who teaches grade 7 English at Beaconsfield High School and who is a recipient of the 2024 Prime Minister's Award for Teaching Excellence. Through the use of literature, Ms. Hill turns her classroom into a doorway of discussion of global issues and community involvement. She challenges her students to find and tell stories from and about the world around them. And she shows them that language and literature are tools for communicating narratives essential to personal growth and collective progress. Thank you, Ms. Hill, for being an inspiration to both your students and your fellow educators, and for helping to build a better Canada.
Questions orales, oral questions, none have.
All righty, here we
Honourable Leader of the
go.
Opposition. The Prime Minister, who is weak, lost control of immigration, has lost control of the borders, and lost control of spending, inflation, debt, and even his own ministers, according to the Globe and Mail. Tension is rising between the PM and the Minister of Finance on the tax cut, and it's compromising his commitment to keep the deficit to $40 billion, as the Minister of Finance promised. Why did the Prime Minister, why is he pushing his Finance Minister to break her promise on this inflationary deficit? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader likes to dramatize things, to distract Canadians from the fact that he voted against a tax break for Canadians. He voted against dental care, which has now reached 1.2 million Canadians. He voted against investment in school food programs, and he continues to try to muzzle his members to prevent them from talking in the interest of their communities, and he refuses to obtain his security clearance to be able to protect our democracy. That's
Here we go with the security clearance again.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition, the Prime Minister, is the one who's trying to muzzle his own Minister of Finance. She made a promise to limit the deficit to $40 billion, to avoid further inflation, which is costing Canadians so much that they can't feed their children. And now he has forced his minister to break her promise. And he's attacking her in the papers. Why is the Prime Minister forcing his minister to break her promise and her credibility? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, as we've just seen, why the Conservative leader keeps on playing these dramatic games. It's because inflation is now at the level that is expected by the Bank of Canada, which has led to a cut in the key rate of 0.5 percentage points. And we are here to help Canadians. We have kept inflation down, but what they have done, they have voted against the school food program to help young people across our country, and he is blocking access to dental care. He is not here to help Canadians.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This week, Prime Minister has lost control of the borders, lost control of immigration, lost control of spending, debt, and inflation. Now he's lost control of his own cabinet. Yesterday, the Globe and Mail reported that there's a big fiscal feud that has broken out between the Prime Minister and his Finance Minister. At stake is that she wanted to run a gigantic $40 billion deficit, but that was her guardrail. And now this Prime Minister is pushing her through that guardrail and pushing all Canadians off the fiscal cliff. Why?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservative leader likes to make up little dramas to try and distract Canadians from the fact that he voted against a tax break for all Canadians. He's trying to hide from the fact that he continues to muzzle his own MPs so they cannot be their community's voices in Ottawa, instead being his voice in forcing them to face billions of dollars in cuts to housing programs. He continues to refuse to get his security clearance because he doesn't want to keep his own MPs safe from foreign interference. That's why he's trying to distract Canadians from what's going on.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Muzzling, Mr. Speaker. His Liberal MPs are not speaking out against him because he's allowing so much liberty. It's because he's so weak.
Right.
And there's nothing worse than a weak bully. He's now cracking down on his own finance minister, some feminist. On this side of this House, I lead by inspiration while he leads by intimidation. Once again, why won't he follow my inspiration and stand up for the promise that he made to keep the deficit under $40 billion?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Once again, Mr. Speaker, we see very clearly for the Leader of the Opposition, it's all about him. Well, for us, Mr. Speaker, it's all about Canadians. It's all about giving Canadians a tax break over the next 2 months that the Conservative Leader voted against. Right. It's about delivering dental care to 1.2 million Canadians, where 3 million Canadians are already approved to access dental care in the coming year. The fact is, Mr. Speaker, we continue to be there for Canadians. He continues to be there for himself to try and block the help we're delivering to Canadians to make sure everyone thinks everything is broken because he's busy breaking it.
Huh? Pierre's busy breaking it. What?
Order. Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He's been Prime Minister for 9 years. Let's review the chronology. So, not even 8 months ago, his minister said the deficit would not exceed $40 billion, the guardrail. Then, he went and got his banker friend, Carbon Tax Carney, to become his top economic advisor, stripping the power away from his finance minister. And suddenly, the guardrail was broken. Is he really going to subject his finance minister to the humiliation of reading Carney's fiscal update, which busts through the guardrail?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, this morning the Bank of Canada announced interest rates are going down yet again. That is terrible news for the Leader of the Opposition, but it's great news for Canadians for whom things will become more affordable. On top of that, a tax break out for Canadians over the next 2 months that the Leader of the Opposition voted against. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because he cares more about his own political interests than he does about Canadians who are struggling. Oh, he'll talk about the challenges Canadians are facing to try and instrumentalize them for his own gain, but he won't lift a finger to help Canadians.
I might start watching Senate question period as well, because at least they actually have conversations. It sounds like here it's just a bunch of whining and crying most of the time.
Let's just table the report.
A lot of the same things being repeated from over a month and a half ago.
Against Quebec's values, because Quebec is attached to, like most Western countries, to the notion of separating church and state. And I'm wondering what the Prime Minister, to the thousands of Muslims in Quebec who are happy and welcome in their society that has welcomed them. The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we have always defended and will always defend the freedom of ideas, freedom of expression, freedom of beliefs. This is a fundamental value for all Canadians and all those who come to Canada. And this is why on this side of the House, we'll always defend individual rights and the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. This is clear, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. I'd like to make things a little bit more concrete, Mr. Speaker. Is the Prime Minister backing people who at schools, secular schools in Quebec, are imposing their religion? Is he backing those who are literally bullied because they want to respect the principle of secularism in Quebec schools? It's one or the other. Which one? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, very clearly, we will always defend the freedom of religion, freedom of expression, which are fundamental values for all Canadians and Quebecers. And that is why we're moving forward to defend the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. At the same time, Mr. Speaker, whether it's at independent universities or elsewhere, every institution has the responsibility of hiring the best possible professors and teachers based on merit, and that's what all Quebecers and Canadians expect.
The honourable member for Burnaby South.
Donald Trump is a bully, and bullies prey on weakness.
You're a bully.
When Trump says jump, the Prime Minister says how high. And when Trump trash talks Canada,
When the government says pension, Jagmeet says how much.
when Trump trolls Canada, hundreds and thousands of Canadians worry that they might lose their job. Why won't the Prime Minister fight back and protect Canadian jobs?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the job of a Canadian Prime Minister is to stand up for Canadian jobs, for Canadian workers, the Canadian economy. That is exactly what we are doing with a level of serious and a level of focus and, quite frankly, a Team Canada approach that brings together, the Premiers brings together different actors from unions, from businesses, from expertise across the country. That is why we will continue to take this seriously, not freak out like the NDP or repeat the attacks like the Conservatives. We will stand up for Canadians like we have before, as we will again.
Repeat the attacks like the Conservatives. You've been asking Poilievre to get his security clearance for over a month and a half now.
Either, Mr. Speaker.
The Prime Minister is doing nothing while Trump mocks our country. Order, please. The honourable member for Burnaby South, from the beginning, please.
Isn't safe either.
The Prime Minister is doing nothing while Trump mocks our country, and doing nothing while Trump threatens good Canadian jobs. I've fought bullies all my life. You have to be strong and not play their game. When will the Prime Minister stop showing weakness? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, a few years ago, during the first Trump administration, when there were tariffs imposed on steel and aluminum workers across the country, we responded reasonably but firmly, and we saw these tariffs removed. We were able to renegotiate NAFTA by protecting not only supply management, but also things like cultural exemptions and the continuity of our trade between our two countries. We did so by taking challenges seriously, but we worked responsibly, and that's what we'll do once again.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Quote, Finance Minister, 2022. This is a line we shall not cross. Then she listed 3 lines. 1, that the deficit would only go down. It went up. 2, that she would pay off the COVID debt. Not only has she not paid off a penny, the debt has gone up. And 3, that the debt to GDP ratio would only drop, and it has risen. Did the Finance Minister voluntarily cross her own lines, or did the Prime Minister push her?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition is once again putting on his little dramatic acts because he is trying to distract Canadians from the core facts. Interest rates are down again. Canadians will be getting a tax break over the next 2 months, despite the best efforts of the Conservative leader, who once again, twice this past week, saw that this House has no confidence in him. And third, 3 million Canadians are now approved for access to dental care for the coming year. These are things that he stood against, but Canadians are getting anyway.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister is silencing his own finance minister. She was already wildly irresponsible with the public purse, but not irresponsible enough for him. She wanted to keep the deficit at a already massive $40 billion. He said it's not enough. Canadians are not paying enough inflation, according to him. So once again, did she voluntarily smash through her fiscal guardrail, or did he push her?
Yeah.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the Leader of the Opposition puts on these little performances because he wants to try and distract Canadians from the facts. We have the lowest deficit amongst G7 countries and will continue to. We are the third largest receiver in the world of foreign direct investment, #1 per capita in the G20, because countries around the world and companies around the world have confidence not just in Canada but in Canadians. The question that people should ask is, why doesn't the Leader of the Opposition have confidence in Canada or confidence in Canadians?
We don't have confidence in you, buddy.
I know it's Wednesday and colleagues are very enthusiastic to participate, but I'd invite them not to take the floor unless recognized by the Speaker.
Colleagues,
the
please.
Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Canadians do not have confidence in him, nor does his own party or his own cabinet, nor apparently does the Bank of Canada, which today was forced into an emergency panicked rate cut to confront the collapsing economy. The governor of the bank said the economy is softer than he expected it would be, and despite the fact that inflation is rising, that all 4 measures of it are above the target, he's being forced to cut the rates to save the economy from outright collapse. When will the Prime Minister stop breaking the economy and call a carbon tax election so we can fix it?
Again, I'm going to ask members not to take the floor unless recognized by the Chair.
Colleagues, please.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
This is completely illogical.
Say that in English. The reality is, Mr. Speaker, he's just making this stuff up in a way you couldn't believe. Inflation has been within the target range of the Bank of Canada for over 10 months now. This is because we have been there to help Canadians with things like dental care, like a school food program, with investments that are growing the economy in a way that has brought down inflation and allowed the Bank of Canada to cut rates faster than just about any other G7 country. We are there for Canadians. He's the one voting against things.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
You know what's up? Inflation's up. Unemployment is up. Inflation is up. It's not only up, every single measure of inflation is now above its target. Unemployment is up. It's at 10% in Toronto now.
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Please start again.
You know what's up? Inflation's up. All 4 measures of inflation are now above target. Unemployment's up. In Toronto, it's over 10%. You know what else is up? Housing costs. They've actually doubled. They've risen more than in any other country in the G7. You know what else is up? Food bank use is up. It too has doubled, with 2 million people lined up at the food bank. And you know what else is up again? The promise-breaking inflationary deficit. So why doesn't he tell us, if he's figured out how to count, what the deficit will be this year?
Right. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, one has to take a moment to appreciate how difficult it must be to be the Leader of the Opposition at a time when things are getting better for Canadians. He spends all his time, and has for the past... That's enough.
I'm going to ask members, please, in particular, the members from Portage.
It's starting to get quite rowdy near the end of question period today. I wonder if we're going to have some point of orders or not that get out of hand.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister to start again.
Mr. Speaker, the challenges faced by the Leader of the Opposition is that he's spent so long explaining to Canadians that everything is broken that when things start to get better, he refuses to actually help Canadians. He's voted against a tax break for Canadians over the next few months. He's voted against the dental care that's helped already well over 1 million Canadians. He is stuck in a place where, as Canadians are starting to come through the difficult times the global economy has put them in, he needs to continue to talk down Canadians, talk down our economy, and scare people into voting for him. It won't work.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Mr. Speaker, yesterday the bloc voted once again for $21 billion in federal spending from the centralizing government. In total, $500 billion inflationary, centralizing, liberal spending, more power for the government here in Ottawa, less money in the pockets of Quebecers. What did the Prime Minister offer the Bloc leader to convince him to support these big deficits, bureaucracy, and inflation that the federal government is imposing? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. His question, the question that all Quebecers and Canadians should ask is why, on the contrary, is the Conservative Party voting against funds for affordable housing? They voted against military aid for Ukraine. They voted against funding.
Because we need that money here, Justin. We have problems here that we need to fix. We need that money here. We can't keep sending the money. Oh my God.
Why parliamentarians supported this. It's why the Conservative leader stands up against Canadians. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition. Because money is never going to do what he's saying. They're just increasing bureaucracy in Ottawa like they always do. But the Bloc leader says he needs to support the government spending by voting for these appropriations. Otherwise, everything will just shut down like it does in the U.S. But we're not the U.S. If appropriation isn't approved, the government doesn't close. There's an election. It gives people a choice. Will the Prime Minister pay for classes on how the parliamentary system works for the Bloc leader? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, we're starting to get used to this disdain from the Conservative leader against the government, members of the government. But now the fact he's starting to disdain other members of this parliament, other leaders, shows truly his approach, which is truly not worthy of this place or the responsibility that we all have to defend the interests of Canadians. But he cannot explain why he voted against a tax break for Canadians. He can't explain why he voted against dental care for seniors. So he decides to attack and to insult people. Canadians deserve better, Mr. Speaker. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Mr. Speaker, superior education, higher education institutions, are they free, as the Prime Minister says? That's a good question. But what we do know, however, is that education is provincial jurisdiction, and it's up to Quebec to decide what happens in Quebec schools. So I'd like to know, just like the previous question, is the Prime Minister supporting students and professors for sexual education in Quebec, and does he support, rather, those who insult them and use fear for religious reasons? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, regardless of the various jurisdictions across the country, which we do respect, the federal government has the responsibility to ensure that all Canadians are protected by the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, whether it's freedom of expression, freedom of ideas and beliefs. All of this has to be respected across our country. And obviously, we do respect the work that the provinces do to deliver their education systems, but we will always be here to defend these fundamental freedoms for everyone, particularly for vulnerable children. The honourable member for Belleuil-Chambly. There are a few lessons encouraged for what we're seeing in this parliament, but I'd like to remind everyone there is in the criminal code a disposition that allows people under a religious pretext to spread hate and to incite violence. Since we don't have courage to do anything else, well, can the Prime Minister end this religious exception and end the legitimacy of this hateful propaganda and this call to violence for religious reasons? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, spreading hate or encouraging violence is always illegal in Canada, and that's why we expect our police forces to be here to protect people and to ensure that the law is enforced. We'll always be here to protect and defend the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, as well as freedom of expression of religion and ideas in Canada. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
The Prime Minister and the entire Liberal caucus voted against taking the GST off new homes, which would have saved up to $50,000 for a young couple trying to buy a home, almost $3,000 a year in lower mortgage payments, and would have stimulated an extra 30,000 additional homes built. Even the Prime Minister's own housing advisor said that this was the best housing policy he's seen in a generation. Why does the Prime Minister insist on taxing young people who are struggling to pay the doubling housing costs that he's brought since he took office?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians have long learned that whenever Conservatives make promises, you have to look at the small print. And what the Leader of the Opposition actually proposed was cutting billions of dollars worth of investments to municipalities across the country to create more density, to accelerate the construction of homes, and to cut bureaucracy and red tape. Indeed, members of the Conservative Party have been advocating to invest in their communities, to send money to their mayors. And the Leader of the Opposition wrote a letter in their name saying, no, none of them want those investments in housing. Shame on him, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he's again imagining things. His program does not build homes, it builds bureaucracy. The only density is in his head. Our policy was
I'm going to ask the the Leader of the Opposition to withdraw that and to rephrase his question.
Thank you. It's in his imagination, that's all. Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister wants to tax people up to $50,000 on buying a home so that he can give more money to the very bureaucrats that block home building. It's not that his housing funds don't help. It's worse. They actually block new home building with more bureaucrats. Why don't we follow my plan to slash the bureaucracy, axe the tax, and build the homes?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the problem with what the Conservative leader is saying, leaving aside the childish insults, is that his own MPs are going behind his back, pleading to the minister to please send investments to build more homes to their municipalities, are complaining behind his back to the CBC that they can't stand up for their communities. Mr. Speaker, MPs are supposed to be their communities' voices in this place, but
I believe that MPs should not be able to make these claims unless they can name the exact individuals that are going behind said person's back. And that goes across the board with every party. Because we just need the truth at this point. Not enough of the bullshit and lies. It's a lot of he said, she said.
The opposition.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Bloc voted against cutting GST on the purchase of new homes. So I just want to understand, a so-called sovereignist party wants to take money out of young Quebecers' pockets who are buying homes, to give it to the most centralizing government in our history, the battled federal government. How come a sovereignist party wants to concentrate power and Quebecers' money here in Ottawa? This question is not for the government's administration.
Like when Trudeau said there was a list of individuals that were involved in foreign interference and tried to use it against Poilievre as a talking point and a point to battle and argue against, if he would have just named the individuals, it would have taken him so much further. I don't know why they don't just name people when it comes to these issues, whether it's Pierre, Trudeau, Jagmeet, Blanchet, I don't care who it is. Enough of like JD just said, no more being anonymous. Come forward with who they are.
Billion that the federal government and the province are investing for the Housing Accelerator Fund helps to increase densification and increase housing construction while eliminating red tape. But the Conservative members in Quebec can't talk about this. They can't say how these cuts, $1.8 billion in cuts that the Conservative Party is proposing, how bad they'll be because they're afraid of their leader.
Well, in the House of Commons, no matter who it is, they're not allowed to name specific individuals. You're actually not allowed to do that as an argument or a defense.
$50,000 in the pockets of young Quebecers who are buying homes. After Liberal programs managed to double the cost of housing and have tripled rents in Montreal. The Bloc is voting to feed federal bureaucracy with the money of Quebecers. It's only the Conservative Party that is in favor of sovereignty for young Quebecers to be able to keep their own money in their own pockets. I see that the Right Honourable Prime Minister is rising. Mr. Speaker, $900 million has been invested by this, well, sent to Quebec rather, to create more homes, less bureaucracy, and accelerate housing construction and eliminate red tape. And this is money that the Conservative leader is proposing to take away from Quebec. And these young Quebecers who need to find affordable homes and who need to have opportunities won't see construction under a Conservative government because they want to cut in housing investment, and that is why people have voted.
The honourable member for Winnipeg Centre.
Mr. Speaker, the special interlocutor, the AFN, the Canadian Medical Association, and now the victims' ombudsperson are calling for legal mechanisms to end residential school denialism. But the Liberal Attorney General is missing in action when it comes to the rise of extremism against Indigenous people. He has failed to protect survivors and their families from violence. Inciting hate is not free speech. So will the Prime Minister heed these calls and adopt my bill C-413 to protect survivors, their families, from the incitement of hate?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
The incitement of hate. What about the fact that most of them don't have clean drinking water in their communities? Why don't we start there?
Path of reconciliation
basic necessities, basic needs
is walked on by everyone, and that's why we've stepped up significantly in our anti-racism strategy, why we continue to work with that member on her private member's bill, why we continue to move forward to make sure that everyone, despite all those who continue to attempt to deny residential schools, all those who believe in the better future for Canada, hold together and prevent denialism from happening.
The honourable member for Edmonton Griesbach.
Mr. Speaker, it's the holidays. Winter is here and people are dying. At a time when people should be gathered around the table, under a warm roof, 4 Edmontonians have died on the streets. And last winter, over 100 people lost a limb due to frostbite. Liberals have let people in Edmonton down. They're either too weak or don't care to stand up to Conservative Premier Danielle Smith's cuts to Edmonton's social services. Why is this Prime Minister, just like the Conservatives, standing by while Edmontonians freeze?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we put significant amounts of money forward for the provinces to tackle the issue of encampments, to tackle homelessness. We've made historic investments in increasing housing and decreasing homelessness. Provinces have been varied in their response to be willing to work with the federal government. That's why we're working directly with the City of Edmonton and Mayor Sohi on moving forward on supports to fight homelessness in Edmonton, as we are right across the country. It takes investment, it takes compassion, it takes partnership, and that's what we're doing.
That's right.
The honourable member for Northwest Territories.
Mr. Speaker, since 2015, our government has made reconciliation with Indigenous people one of the most crucial priorities for Canada. We have made important progress from returning unceded land back to communities, making aggressive investments into housing, reforming health care, and eliminating almost 150 long-term boil water advisories across the country. Can the Prime Minister tell Canadians what more we as a government can do to support reconciliation?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to begin by thanking the member for the Northwest Territories for his tireless advocacy and his leadership. We introduced the First Nations Clean Water Act to ensure clean drinking water for generations to come and give First Nations the tools to manage their own drinking water infrastructure. It was shameful that in the presence of chiefs gathered from across the country, the Conservative Party voted to refuse to send that bill to the Senate. They stood against us sending C-61 to the Senate. Shame on them. We need to solve drinking water for generations to come.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
This week, Prime Minister has lost control of our borders. He started by teaming up with the British Columbia NDP to decriminalize fentanyl. He has kept the fentanyl precursor, 80% of fentanyl precursor ingredients legal. He allows 99% of shipping containers to come into our country uninspected. And he passed C-5, which gives house arrest to the kingpins who produce this poison. Will he reverse his radical liberalization of drugs so that not one more mother will have the heartbreak of losing a child to overdoses?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the toxic drug epidemic has been hitting hard in communities right across this country and indeed across North America. That is why we have been stepping up in an evidence-based, compassion-based, public health-based approach to solving for the opioid epidemic and the toxic drug crisis. We're going to continue to lean on scientists and researchers and compassionate frontline workers as we invest to support Canadian families from coast to coast to coast. It is not more ideology proposed by the Leader of the Opposition that is going to solve this. It is the careful application of reasonable responses.
That's right.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
It is his weird, woke liberalization ideology that has caused the 47,000 deaths and the 200% increase in overdoses. But just like he has lost control of the drugs, he's lost control of immigration. Don't take my word for it. The Globe and Mail said, and I quote, the Liberal government lost control of Canada's immigration system, highlighting that there are now 30,000 people who have been ordered deported that the Prime Minister has now lost track of.
Like everything else.
What's his plan to find them and deport them?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, despite the Leader of the Opposition trying to pretend it's not true, Canada remains the best country in the world. And the fact that we are facing significant challenges like other places around the world doesn't take away from that. We will continue to roll up our sleeves. We will continue to defend Canada's interests, defend Canada's borders, work with our partners in the United States. The Leader of the Opposition can't help himself from talking down Canada and Canadians. We're going to work with Canadians, with provinces in a Team Canada approach and protect Canada's structures and systems.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
We have the best country with the worst Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker. That's the fact. He's weak, woke, and wasteful, and he's lost track of 30,000 people who've been ordered deported but have now vanished. Now, we have millions of other people who are going to come up for exit when their permits and visas expire over the next year and a half. And the Prime Minister won't tell us what's the plan to get the people out of the country who are not supposed to be here.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians continue to have confidence in immigration as a good thing for our economy, good thing of our country, because they know we have a strong and rigorous immigration system that adjusts depending on the needs and the opportunities for Canada to grow and integrate more people. That is what we are continuing to defend. That is what we fight for every single day. While the Leader of the Opposition talks down Canada, talks down Canadians, and puts partisan attacks ahead of reasonable policy solutions, we're going to do the work necessary to protect Canadians and protect our immigration system.
That's great.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Encore une faible réponse.
Once again, a weak answer from a weak Prime Minister who has lost control of our immigration system. Three Chileans here illegally escaped from a center in Laval. These 3 fugitives can be added to 750 individuals who can be considered dangerous in Quebec, and that this government is unable to get out of the country. And we've learned that this government has literally lost track of 30,000 people under expulsion orders. What is the plan to get these people out of the country? The Right Honourable Prime Minister, Mr. Speaker, over recent years, we have significantly invested in our border security services. We have invested in our police services. That's a real contrast with the Conservatives who fired 1,100 border agents when they were in power. They have made cuts to law enforcement. They have made cuts to the border. They have chosen to harm Canada's security and to instead promote dangerous weapons. And that is why we have put an end to the ability to purchase assault-style weapons. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, I perhaps have a strange question for the Prime Minister. The Conservative leader is taking advantage of his position to say whatever he wants about the Bloc Québécois, about me, about Quebec. And yet, with remarkable cowardice, for over a year, he has been refusing all of the invitations to public debate that I keep sending him. And today he has gone even farther. Is the Prime Minister not concerned about the fact that the Conservatives keep passionately pushing the Bloc Québécois to be even more sovereigntist than it is now? I see that the Right Honourable Prime Minister is rising. Yes, Mr. Speaker, I know very well that the Bloc Québécois, like other parliamentarians in this House, doesn't take anything the Conservative leader doesn't take anything he says very seriously. And in fact, very few Quebecers take anything that the Conservative leader says very seriously, because he is against women's rights. He wants to re-legalize assault-style weapons. He wants to eliminate the dental program that has already helped hundreds of thousands of Quebecers. We will be there to invest. We will work with our colleagues from the Bloc Québécois and the NDP to help people. But the Conservatives just want to start fights. The Honourable Member for Belleuil-Chambly. Well, Mr. Speaker, something that is happening now is that a parliamentary committee of the House of Commons is attacking Quebec. The Conservatives seem to have it seems to have trouble coming up with any new questions. Same thing for the answers. It's like a broken record.
Oh, the Bloc actually saying something.
Challenges that we should be dealing with in this Parliament. Is it not time to wish each other a happy holidays and say that when we see each other again, it will be because there's an election? The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît. Le très honorable Premier ministre.
Blanchette just called for an election.
Speaker, I'm always very happy to wish anyone happy Christmas. But we still have work to do, Mr. Speaker. We have a fall economic statement to present that will deliver help for Quebecers and Canadians. We will invest in our future at a time when we are facing challenges with the Americans. We have work to do in the spring, in the next parliamentary session, to add people to the list of those eligible for dental care. We will be there to offer free medication and free insulin for those who need it. We will be doing the work that we need to do.
Le chef de l'opposition.
Oui, alors.
The honorable leader of the opposition. Yes, it's time for debate. It's time for an election, Mr. Speaker. Just yesterday, the Bloc Québécois repeatedly voted against an election and voted for keeping this government in power. The leader of the Bloc Québécois will have to face the fact that the Conservatives want to cut the GST on new housing, but the Liberals want to do the opposite. The Bloc Québécois wants to increase the bureaucracy. The Bloc Québécois wants to make the bureaucracy bigger. We would get rid of it. This is the kind of choice that Quebecers are facing. Once again, we're hearing questions coming from all parties that have nothing to do with the federal administration, but I see the Prime Minister is rising. Well, Mr. Speaker, yesterday we voted for all sorts of things. For example, the Holocaust Commemoration Program, the Canada Housing Benefit, and all sorts of other things. But the Conservatives voted against that. We voted for emergency funding for veterans. We voted for the National Child Protection Strategy to protect them from online harms. But the Conservatives voted against that. Yes, I recognize that parliamentarians from other parties voted in favor of all those good things, but the Conservatives are constantly voting against what is actually going to help Canadians. The honourable leader of the opposition.
Minister who's lost control of spending, debt, and inflation. Workers are now forced to fight to make up lost wages. That's why last year Canada had more strikes than any year since 1981. That is, since the last Trudeau was breaking the country and its economy. Now, Mr. Speaker, Canadians are suffering because they can't get their donations to charities, small businesses can't get their payments, and the economy is losing millions. Will he sit down the two sides, get a deal, and put an end to this dreadful strike?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Unlike the Conservative Party, whose attacks on unions are well documented from 575 and 377, their anti-union bills that the Leader of the Opposition voted for, from continually choosing to use back-to-work legislation, as they did time and time again, we believe that the best deals happen at the bargaining table, which is why the Minister has got the two sides of Canada Post together to try and find a solution that will work. Mr. Speaker, we know small businesses are hurting, Canadians in rural and remote areas are hurting. We will continue to look to help them, and we get this resolved the right way.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Il est faible. Il a perdu le...
He's weak. He has lost control of spending. He has lost control of the debt and of inflation, which means that workers need to fight for a pay rise. And last year, we saw the highest number of strikes since 1981. Which was when his father broke the economy. And now there's a strike at Canada Post, which is hurting our economy, small businesses, nonprofits. When will the Prime Minister get both sides of the table to put an end to the strike? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Party's hostility to workers, towards unions, is well documented. I don't need to say anything more about it. But what we will do is ensure that the best possible agreements are brought to the negotiation table, and that's why we encourage all parties to continue to negotiate, because we know everyone is struggling. Non-profits are struggling. Canadians in remote and rural areas are struggling. They depend on Canada Post, and that is why we need solutions, and we are working on that.
Honorable député de Saint-Laurent.
The Honourable Member for Saint-Laurent. Mr. Speaker, last week was the 35th anniversary of the École Polytechnique massacre. Quebecers and Canadians from throughout the country mourned the 14 women who were murdered due to a sadistic act of gender-based violence. Over the last few years, there have also been horrendous tragedies due to mass shootings in places like Portapique, Truro, and Quebec City. Can the Prime Minister tell us about the government's measures to protect Canadians from gun violence? The Right Honourable Prime Minister. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the member for Saint-Laurent for her question and her hard work. Unlike the leader of the Conservatives, we will always prioritize the safety of Canadians, not the gun lobby. Thanks to our gun buyback program, we will be removing assault-style weapons from our communities. We will always denounce violence against women, and we will take action on things like red flag laws.
Canadians are a tiny portion of the NHL. The NHL is widespread all over.
Well, let's see what the police have to say about that after a 116% increase in gun crime under this Prime Minister. And a repeat violent offender out on early parole allegedly murdered a 34-year-old woman in Toronto on Sunday. The Toronto police had this question, and I quote, "For the Prime Minister, how was this person, with their history, allowed to access a firearm and be alone with a partner when they were supposedly living in a supervised community setting? What answers are you providing to the victim's family or our communities who continue to see the heartbreaking results of your weak policies on crime?" End quote.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker.
Everybody likes to say hockey is very popular here in Canada, which is true, but it's even more popular over in Europe. It has way more depth in Europe.
Conservatives stood against that and fought against that every step of the way, just like they're working hard to make legal again.
And America has more funding for sports teams than Canada does, on top of that.
Unfreeze the handgun bans, and last time they were in office, they cut 1,100 workers from CBSA to help, who were there to prevent illegal guns flowing in from the United States.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
He has not banned a single gun. He's spent over $60 million to fail to take a single gun off the road. He's had to give it an amnesty to reverse all of the announced gun bans that he did, standing in front of a cartoon image of a scary Hollywood-style gun. And what has been the sum total of all of this? A 116% increase in gun violence since he became Prime Minister. When will he realize that banning Grandpa Joe's hunting rifle is not going to stop crime, that instead we actually have to lock up the criminals?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Speaker, instead of trying to scare Grandpa Joe, he should be honest with Grandpa Joe in that we have banned assault-style weapons, and already we've seen thousands of assault-style weapons collected and destroyed. These are things that we are doing that the Conservative Party and its funders, the gun lobby, continue to stand against. They will re-legalize assault-style weapons in this country, unfreeze the market on handguns. That's what they promised the gun lobby, and they hide behind Grandpa Joe because they can't admit it out loud.
Leave Grandpa Joe alone.
Order. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, he admitted he doesn't even know what an assault rifle is, let alone able to ban one. He spent $60 million, and his government admits they didn't take a single firearm off the road. There's been a 116% increase in gun violence under his leadership, and 99% of the shipping containers that come in are not inspected at all, even though the previous Conservative government increased the number of frontline border officers. Why is it that the Prime Minister is so busy trying to protect turkeys from hunters that he doesn't protect Canadians from criminals?
Order. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, not only has this House defined what an assault-style weapon is in law, the RCMP are now acting on that classification.
He can't even say what it is.
Members can exercise restraint here. I'm inviting all members, please, to do so. The Right Honourable Prime Minister from the top, please.
Mr. Speaker, not only has this House defined what an assault-style weapon was over the objections of Conservatives, but we are now removing those guns and destroying those guns while we compensate those who lawfully purchased them. That is what responsible gun control looks like. Unfortunately, the leader of the Conservative Party has promised the gun lobby that he will re-legalize assault-style weapons, reopen the frozen market for handguns, and make things more dangerous for Canadians and particularly for women right across the country. Shame on him!
I'm sorry, Trudeau, but a gun with a 10 capacity magazine is not assault style.
Halifax West.
Mr. Speaker, Canadians have been through a lot in the last few years, and they're looking at all levels of government for relief and support.
Just because it has a couple tack rails on it doesn't make it assault style.
I bring every day to Ottawa when I represent my constituents. Unlike the Conservatives who've been forbidden to advocate for their communities. Can the Prime Minister give an update on what this Liberal government is doing to make life better for Canadians?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the member for Halifax West for her advocacy and her hard work. There was good news this morning, Mr. Speaker. The Bank of Canada has cut its interest rate by another 50 points. And today, we announced that 3 million Canadians have been approved for dental care, with more than 1.2 million Canadians, mostly seniors, already having received care. But the good news doesn't stop there. On Saturday, a tax break.
Now be careful there, Silent Night. Trudeau might come for you.
Mr. Speaker, the Conservatives voted against it, but it's real. Canadians are going into Christmas and the holiday season with lower interest rates, lower taxes, and more money in their pockets.
The Honourable Member for Courtenay Alberni.
Mr. Speaker, forest biomass energy production has the potential to provide Canadian electrical grids with a sustainable source of energy. This will also create high-paying jobs for rural communities like the paper mill in Port Alberni. The U.S. Inflation Reduction Act includes tax incentives for biomass, putting Canada's forest sector at a competitive disadvantage. The Liberals promised a clean technology and electricity investment tax credit in 2023, but failed to deliver. Will the Prime Minister finally commit to the timely passage of these tax incentives to help protect Canadian jobs in the forest sector?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, biomass is an important part of the solution as we move forward into being more reliant on renewable energy and understanding how important our forestry industry is, not just for creating good jobs and goods to export and build homes with, but also contributing to our energy opportunities and challenges. We will continue to stand up for innovation in our energy industry. We will continue to stand up for energy workers right across the country in all industries as we work to decarbonize, as we work to invest and innovate, and as we create a better future for all Canadians.
The Honourable Member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Monday we'll find out the extent of Canada's deficit. The Greens offer some solutions.
I'm trying to figure out the extent of how many beers she drank before this.
excess profits of big oil, big banks, and tax the billionaire class. Why will this government not make them pay their fair share?
Let's go.
Order. The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, following the pandemic, we actually brought in an excess profit tax on big banks and insurance companies that were very profitable through a very difficult time for Canadians, and those measures continue. We will always look at making sure everyone pays their fair share, and in regards to oil and gas companies that are creating incredible profits by selling oil and gas to Canadians, we're actually making sure that there is a limit to how much they can pollute, because no industry should have unlimited pollution. They can continue to produce, but they need to reduce their emissions. They need to invest in new ways of supporting their workers and supporting our future.
Colleagues, I would like to draw the members' attention to the presence in the gallery of our former colleague and former leader of the opposition, Mr. Gilles Duceppe.
Oh, I guess we don't get to see the rest. Typical CPAC site, just shuts off the feed. Greg Fungus, muting the feed.
I see that there are a number of points of order. Je vois qu'il y a...
Oh, a lot of points of orders. Here we go.
Points of order.
Leader of the government in the House of Commons.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there have been discussions amongst the parties, and if you seek it, I believe you will find unanimous consent for the following motion.
I'm going to ask all members, please, to listen carefully, because
Guys, Karina does not speak loud, so please quiet down.
The Honourable Government House Leader, she wants to begin again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There have been discussions amongst the parties, and if you seek it, I believe you will find unanimous
I know nobody
consent
wants
for
to
the
hear what she
following
has to
motion.
say, but
That notwithstanding any standing order, special order, or usual practice of the House, at 4 p.m. on Monday, December 16, 2024, the Speaker shall interrupt the proceedings to permit the Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of Finance to make a statement followed by a period of up to 10 minutes for questions and comments. After the statement, a member from each recognized opposition party and a member of the Green Party may reply for a period approximately equivalent to the time taken by the minister's statement, and each statement shall be followed by a period of 10 minutes for questions and comments. Thank you.
All those opposed to the Honourable Minister moving the motion will please say nay. Agreed. La Chambre a entendu l'énoncé.
The House has heard the wording of the question. All those opposed to the motion, please say nay.
Adopté.
Carried.
I see that the Honourable Member from Mississauga Centre is rising on his feet.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, there have been discussions amongst the parties, and if you seek it, I believe you will find unanimous consent for the following motion. That A, the House welcomes the end of the brutal and corrupt Assad regime. B, Canada has been and will continue to be a friend to the Syrian people who have the right to live in peace and dignity. C, in this time of great uncertainty for their country, Canada stands in solidarity with the Syrian people as they pursue their legitimate aspiration to build an inclusive state for all. D, the House calls on the Canadian government to help advance efforts for a democratic Syria that respects the right of all of its people. And E, we call on the transition government to reject extremism and support an inclusive government that represents the diversity of Syrians.
And F, how about we just leave it to the Syrians?
Moving the motion will please say nay. Agreed. The House has heard the terms of the motion. All those opposed to the motion will please say nay. Carried.
There are two other points of order. First, we'll start with the Honourable Member for Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker,
I have no idea what I was going to say. Well, it gets good. Mr. Speaker, I know there have been discussions between the House leaders. Given that the Liberal government will...
I am hearing a number of no's for the Honourable Speaker, the Honourable Member, and so I'm afraid there isn't unanimous consent. I see that the Honourable Member has a second...
I don't even know what he was going to say.
Request point of order, or I'll allow the Honourable Member to present the second one.
Just giving the government an opportunity to defend its own economic update, but this one's different. This one's different.
I am hearing no, I'm afraid, to the Honourable Member from...
This is wild. They're not even letting him speak.
I'm going to encourage all members. I'm going to encourage all members to make sure that they do come up for unanimous consent. That there is negotiation amongst all members, and that we have a reasonable likelihood of it succeeding.
Scheer is laughing. He's clearly doing something cheeky there. That was clearly something cheeky.
À l'ordre, s'il vous plaît.
Order, please.
Le quatrième rappel au...
The fourth point of order is for the member from Rivière-des-Mille. Mr. Speaker, I ask the unanimous consent of this House to adopt the following motion that is seconded by the members for Mirabel, Louis Saint Laurent, and Rosemont of Petit-Patrie. Given that the construction of Mirabel Airport led to the forced expropriation of thousands of families in 1969, that the families who lost their homes, their land, and their community as a result of this forced expropriation are suffering from the trauma of this unspeakable pain, and that due to the end of its commercial flights at Mirabel Airport is now closed to the public, that this House officially apologize to the residents of Mirabel who were expropriated in 1969. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. All those who are opposed that the honourable member move this motion, please say nay. Unfortunately, we do not have unanimous consent.
Oh.
The Honourable Member for Edmonton-Westaskewin is rising on a point of order. The Honourable Member.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, in response to our House Leader's point of order, I just want to point out that before he even had a chance to say a word, I just want to clarify. I want to clarify what your ruling is going to be moving forward. Are we to expect now that if somebody says no before a word is spoken on a point of order, that you are going to stand up and shut down that member from speaking, regardless of which party it is from now on? Is that the precedent?
Yeah, Greg.
I can assure all members that I'm continuing with the normal practice.
Emperor Fergus.
And it's a clear indication that there is not unanimous consent, that we will move on from that. I am now ready to rule on the question of privilege.
Oh.
He just gave you the middle finger. I see that the honourable member.
Oh my God.
I see that there are two honourable members who are rising on points of order. Order.
Oh, Greg is gonna do it.
Order.
He's gonna play the bias. He's gonna run the double standard.
I see that there are members who are rising on a point of order.
Oh, Greg, what are you gonna do, buddy? You can't have that double standard.
The Honourable Government Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
From Lanark, in a red-faced fashion, clearly flipped the bird
Holy shit, guys.
Mr. Speaker, which is another way of giving the finger. That is highly unparliamentary, and I would ask him to uncategorically withdraw the finger, Mr. Speaker.
This is wild.
He should apologize to all parliamentarians.
Holy.
I thank the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary for his intervention. I'm going to invite, that is an important issue which is being raised. I have a number of points of order which are being raised.
Oh, guys, this is getting out of hand, and it's getting out of hand real quick. Here we go. If you guys wanted some excitement after question period, I think we're getting it right here. Greg is playing a double standard, which we typically do see. He just muted the microphone as well. We typically see this double standard. Greg shuts down the Conservatives time and time again. We just saw Scheer get shut down twice without even getting a single word out.
Members who are rising on a point of order.
But when it goes the other way, he allows the Liberal Speaker Kevin to continue as the Conservatives continue to say no.
The honourable member.
When the parliamentary secretary was making a statement, I could not understand what was being said through the interpretation because you have failed to keep order in this place. Please correct that so we can hear what's being said.
Well, I'm going to give... I appreciate that the honourable member points out that... Order, please. I appreciate that the honourable member is raising an issue in terms of interpretation not being provided, and that is a fair point. I will then allow the honourable parliamentary secretary to rise again. However, I think to respond once again to the member from Edmonton Westaskoin, when it was made clear to me, when it was made clear to me that the honourable member from Regina Capel was rising on seeking a unanimous consent, once there is indication that there is no unanimous consent, you pass on to other things. As opposed to what the parliamentary secretary to the leader of the government in the House of Commons was rising on, it was not a point of order, it was not a unanimous consent that he was seeking. He was making a point of order, which doesn't require unanimous consent. So that is the reason why I allowed the member to stand up. So, the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, my point of order was with respect from the member from Lanark Kingston, who ultimately, in a very angered, red-faced manner, flipped the bird to the government. And, Mr. Speaker, that is highly...
I will flip the bird to the government all day. Fuck you guys. Fuck you, Kevin. You stupid fuck.
From the manner in which he expressed himself. That's what we're...
My God.
So, I did say I'm going to get to the order. I did say... Order. Order, please. I did say I was going to get to the honourable member from Lanark Frontenac Kingston, but I did have the member from Edmonton Griesbach also waiting patiently. Is this on the same point of order, the honourable member?
Mr. Speaker, I bore witness on the same point of order to the member from
Frontenac
Kingston in an outrage, disgracefully disgraced this place and all members by yelling, not during his turn, and then giving you the finger, Mr. Speaker. We expect this place to have a level of decorum and a level of respect, and that member has demonstrated multiple times a breach of the very important decorum of this place. He gave the finger, and I witnessed it. Many members seen it, and we would expect an apology and a withdrawal, and we demand that he understand this severe issue.
I thank the honourable member, and I see that the honourable member from Lanark Frontenac Kingston is rising on his feet. The honourable member.
This is wild.
Mr. Speaker, I've been a member of Parliament for 24 years. This is the first time I flipped the bird to anybody. To correct the member, it wasn't to the government, it was to the member from Kingston, the Islands, but of course nobody deserves that, and I withdraw it and apologize to the House.
I enjoined the honourable member from Kamloops to please.
Hey, I'm right here, bro.
The honourable member from Kingston and the Islands.
I certainly accept that apology, and I take no offense to it, Mr. Speaker. It's certainly, maybe it's just a Kingston thing, so.
What is going on right now?
Closed. Now, there are some other members who are rising on a point of order. Should we let us move on? Thank you. I'm now ready to rule on the question of privilege raised on November 29, 2024 by the member for London Fanshawe concerning alleged intimidation during the proceedings of the House. In her intervention, the member claimed that before and during the taking of the last recorded division on Thursday, November 28, 2024, the disorderly behavior of many Conservative Party members reached an unacceptable level. She alleged that members were disruptive to the point where she and her colleagues could not hear their names being called by the table officers. Furthermore, she indicated that her caucus had, prior to the vote, alerted the chair and the table to the possibility of intentional disruptions because of what she felt was inappropriate behavior in the shared opposition lobby. Order, please. Order, please. This made it difficult for her to carry out her duties as the Deputy House Leader for the NDP and constituted a breach of privilege and even a contempt. The member described the behavior of the Conservative Party members, both in the House and in the lobby, as unacceptable, toxic, and designed to intimidate other members as they carried out their parliamentary duties. Le député de New Westminster Burnaby a pris la parole.
The member for New Westminster Burnaby weighed in to support the member's question of privilege. In addition to commenting on the lack of decorum during the vote, he alluded to what he considered as other objectionable behaviors by some Conservative Party members, whom he accused of being inebriated. And reminded the House that the party whips are responsible for ensuring a safe workplace that is free of harassment for members and employees who work with them.
Frequently with conflicting accounts of what occurred in the lobbies leading up to the vote, as well as on the floor of the House, during the sitting and after adjournment. In particular, the House Leader of the official opposition rose to fully deny the accusations made by the member for London Fanshawe and the member for New Westminster Burnaby. He detailed the events of the evening in question as he saw them, stating that it was the members of the New Democratic Party who acted in a harassing manner towards members and staff of the Conservative Party. He argued that if any contempt occurred, it was a result of the behavior of New Democratic Party members who stormed up the aisle to confront the chair at the adjournment of the House and then approached the Conservative benches to confront some other members.
This did happen.
He therefore requested that the member for London Fanshawe withdraw.
We broke this down the other day.
La présidence traitera en premier lieu des préoccupations.
The chair will first deal with concerns about behavior in the opposition lobby. As described in House of Commons Procedure and Practice 3rd edition at page 295, and I quote, "Connected by doors to the chamber, the lobbies are furnished with tables, armchairs, and office equipment for members' use. Members attending the sitting of the House use the lobbies to conduct business and are able to return to the chamber at a moment's notice. The party whips assign staff to work from the lobbies, and pages are stationed in the lobbies to answer telephones and carry messages. The lobbies are not open to the public. Security staff control access to the lobbies in accordance with guidelines set by the Corporate Security Office after consultation with the whips." Unquote.
And their staff have always ensured a harmonious cohabitation within the opposition lobby, a shared working space currently used by the three opposition parties, as well as independent members. By tradition and convention, the lobbies have been viewed as a sort of sanctum that affords members and caucuses the needed privacy to plan and coordinate their work in the chamber. However, lobbies are not an extension of the House chamber, at least not in terms of its deliberative function. Ultimately, how lobbies operate and are regulated is an administrative matter under the purview of the Board of Internal Economy, as are other working spaces beyond the chamber.
Colleagues, please. Oh, even Greg gets thirsty. Even Emperor Greg needs a drink.
On the issue of the consumption of alcohol within the parliamentary precinct,
The consumption of alcohol.
Speaker Reagan addressed the matter in a ruling on a question of privilege on November 20th, 2018, at page 23,625 of the debates. Quote, subsection 52.3 of the Parliament of Canada Act gives the Board, not the Speaker, the legal authority to act on all financial and administrative matters
respecting A, the House of Commons, its premises and its staff, and B, the members of the House of Commons. Accordingly, the right forum to raise such matters remains the Board of Internal Economy, unquote.
La question de l'utilisation des antichambres et du comportement des députés.
The use of the lobbies and the behavior of members and their staff using the lobbies is therefore a matter that should be brought to the Board of Internal Economy. To that end, I would encourage any member who is concerned about this to raise it with the representatives on the board so that it can be addressed there.
The whips of all parties also play a crucial role in the management of the lobbies. The chair therefore strongly encourages them to look into this issue and work together in finding a suitable solution that all can adhere to. Indeed, the chair has written earlier today to the whips of the opposition parties to this effect. Concerning the behavior of members in the House during the vote on Thursday, November 28, 2024, the excessive noise did indeed hamper members' ability to hear the clerks conducting the roll call. The chair intervened midway through the vote to call the House to order. I also made a statement the following morning, referring members to the House of Commons Procedure and Practice, 3rd edition, at page 643, which sets out the conduct expected during the taking of a vote, which includes not making any noise. In my statement of November 29, 2024, found at page 28,339 of debates, I stated, quote, "The chair hopes this will serve as a good reminder to all members the expectations in regard to decorum during divisions. I understand that some votes are subject to strong disagreements, but it is still expected that all members comport themselves appropriately," unquote.
My God, Greg is reading us a novel.
And so I remind the House again that when votes are being called, members are to remain respectful so that they can be conducted in an orderly fashion. I would add that the adjournment of the House should also happen in an orderly fashion, and that approaching the chair or the seats of one's colleagues to carry on arguments is not helpful or conducive to a respectful atmosphere. While the House had technically adjourned when such events took place on the night in question, the repercussions of these actions have a very negative impact on the manner in which the House operates.
Fanshawe also complained that, in addition to the noise, the pointed heckling was inappropriate and was received by many members as harassing or intimidating. As chair, I wholeheartedly agree that the level of noise in the chamber during the last vote on November 28th was, indeed, outside of the acceptable range. The lack of decorum and noisy disruptions experienced that evening do not meet the expectations Canadians have of us. La députée de London Fanshawe is...
The member for London Fanshawe equated the events to interfering with her ability to carry out her parliamentary duties. While I understand the member's concerns, I cannot conclude that it resulted in any member not being able to vote or participate in proceedings.
I cannot agree that the member was interfered with in the performance of her parliamentary duties. What happened that night was clearly a breach of decorum. I don't excuse this or seek to normalize it, but I'm not aware of any precedents where incidents of this nature rose to matters of contempt or breaches of privilege. I nonetheless take concerns about harassment and intimidation very seriously. While moments of strong disagreement and political tension are common in this place, there is still an expectation that we, as elected officials, treat each other with civility and respect. Apart from being a deliberative and lawmaking body, the House is also a workplace. In addition to members, employees of the House administration and staff from political parties themselves support within these august walls our parliamentary democracy. They are all entitled to a safe working environment and at all times. The chair believes these concerns warrant, at a minimum, a discussion between the whips. They, and in fact any member voluntarily seeking productive solutions to conflicts, may explore available support options provided by the House administration to help mediate this situation. Avant de terminer, je tiens à signaler que
Before closing, I would like to point out that the Standing Committee on Procedure and House Affairs is currently conducting a study on the issue of harassment. This study arguably already provides the remedy the member for London Fanshawe seeks, namely, referring the matter of harassment and intimidation to that committee.
Holy, this is wild, man. Greg is reading like a whole trilogy booklet right now.
Could also fit within the committee's existing study.
Moving forward, as Speaker, I have strong expectations that the whips address the matter in a serious and timely way. Of all the workplaces in Canada, the House of Commons, as a heart of our democracy, should serve as a role model. Members are passionate in defending their views, and this can bring vigorous debates in the House. However, when away from the cameras, we are all colleagues, and we should all work together to ensure a productive and safe workplace for not only ourselves, but for our staff and all those who support us in this great place. Notwithstanding the seriousness of the matter raised, I cannot find this constitutes a prima facie question of privilege. I thank all members for their attention. I see that the honourable member from Regina Capel is rising on a point of order, I imagine.
Uh-oh.
Speaker, and certainly listen to your ruling. I understand that it was basically addressed to the question of privilege raised by the NDP member about what may or may not have happened in the lobby. You have ruled that what goes on in the lobby doesn't fall under the purview of a question of privilege. In response to that, points were raised about the erratic and unhinged behavior of the NDP members in the chamber, even though the mace was off the table. And I'm just wondering, are you going to come back and address those questions that were raised as well?
Yeah.
Once again, I'll invite the honourable member to take a look at my ruling where that question was actually addressed. Point of order, the honourable member for Saanich Gulf Islands.
Speaker, is erratic and unhinged considered parliamentary language in this place?
That is a very good question. I have heard that language being used before in this place, and it was considered acceptable at the time, as of course members know. So that language has been used here before.
What the hell is our parliament doing?
Is rising on his point of order.
Mr. Speaker, that language was utterly inappropriate when my colleague from the official opposition House Leader borders on misogyny. And I would suggest, given the Conservative history of being drunken and disorderly in this House of Commons, they should take lessons from your ruling.
I think we are now, we're going to be getting into a matter of debate, and this is a matter which I'm going to invite all members to please to take a look at the ruling rather, have an opportunity to reflect on that, and if necessary, invite members to come and see the chair. And we're going to get into a tit for tat on this as I'm going to ask.
Uh-oh.
Est-ce que ça fonctionne avec les...
Yes, is everything working with the earpieces? Okay. Just a moment, please. Just a moment. I will just consult the clerks.
What is going on right now, dude? This is just pure ridiculousness. Holy shit. You guys are still here right now. Thank you. The stream is going to be going a little bit longer than usual because these point of orders are, they're getting pretty wacky. A little wacko, you could say. A little unhinged. A lot of out-of-touch MPs crying about out-of-touch issues.
I appreciate the honourable member
Nothing burger
Capel.
issues.
I do not want to open up a debate on this issue between the two members. I'm going to ask again that if members have matters to discuss on this particular matter and what had happened on the Thursday previous at the vote, please come and speak to me in the chair. Of course, because I have taken into account all the issues which have been raised before, and I think the chair has been very generous in terms of hearing concerns that were raised by multiple members on this question. I wish to inform the House that the volume of the earpieces will now be reset. Je désire informer que...
I wish to inform the House that
Okay.
the volume of the earpiece.
I believe we have finally moved on from the point of order situation. Oh, it looks like Shear is going to go up to Fergus here.
Routine business, tabling of documents. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Leader of the Government in the House of Commons.
Mr. Speaker, pursuant to Standing Order
All right,
36
nobody wants to listen to Kevin, and I sure as hell don't want to listen to Kevin either. So that's going to do it for me. Thank you all for being here. Thank you all for being here. If you haven't already, hit that like button, hit that sub button if you are new. I will be live tomorrow for question period again. I believe tomorrow might actually be like one of the last question periods of the calendar, the sitting here. Oh, what view can I use? There we go. The 11th. I typically don't cover Friday, so Thursday, yes, I will be live. I don't know if the 16th and 17th are actually going to be proper days or if they are going to vote to end their time in Parliament to go on Christmas vacation early. If not, I will be live on the 16th and the 17th, marking the 17th as the final day of question period. And honestly, I don't know. Yeah, the 27th, there's going to be a long break in between the stream here. I will try to go live occasionally to cover certain things, but I guess it really depends on what is happening. We're coming close to the end of the year, coming close to the end of the cycle of question period and the House of Commons running. So that's going to do it for today's stream. Thank you all for watching. I will be here tomorrow. Take it easy.